Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. You were at the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors meeting. Today is June 14th. It's about 5 minutes after 9. Apologize for starting a little late. If everybody could please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for our invocation by Pastor Isa Bake. Pastor Isa Bake from St. John Assyrian Presbyterian Church and the chaplain for Memorial Hospital.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. As we continue praying for the tragedies in the United States and also continue praying for our Ukrainian community in our county and also praying for the surging COVID-19 again, today actually is the Flag Day, and I have tried to wear my flag colors tie. The Flag Day was the day that everyone was fighting against the enemies under their own flag, and it came to the point that they all came to fight under one flag of the United States, and they became united. I found it fitting that instead of to bring my words of prayers, to bring the words of President Franklin Roosevelt in 1942, in the days, darkest days of war, he offered a prayer on the Flag Day. And I would like to share this prayer with this community. The spirit of man has awakened, the soul of man has gone forth. Grant us, Lord, the wisdom and the vision to comprehend the greatness of man's spirit that suffers and endures so hugely for a goal beyond his own brief span. We are all of us children of earth. Grant us that simple knowledge: if our brothers are oppressed, then we are oppressed. If they hunger, we hunger. If their freedom is taken away, our freedom is not secure. Grant us, Lord, a common faith, that man shall know bread and peace, that he shall know justice and righteousness, freedom and security, and equal opportunity, and an equal chance to do this best, not only in our own lands, but throughout the world. And in that faith, let us march toward the clean world our hands can make. Amen. My prayers are for this board in our county to march forward to a clean county, to a united county on this Flag Day. Also, I would like to wish a very happy Father's Day is coming to all the fathers here, and the gift of manhood, and if making it more inclusive, gift of fatherhood. Not everyone is father, but everyone has a gift of fatherhood. May God continue blessing you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor. That was very nice. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on. We're going to. Oh, sorry, Jody, go right ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Just a quick announcement for everyone. From time to time, we do have to add a matter to our agenda that came to our attention after the posting of the agenda the prior Friday. And this week, we will be requesting the Board of Supervisors add one matter that came to our attention afterwards. We'll consider that matter after the consent calendar, and it will be related to the Board of Supervisors meeting calendar. So we will be asking the board to revise their meeting calendar for a future meeting, but we'll do that after consent. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Okay, we're going to move on now to our quarterly public health update related to COVID-19. COVID-19. And then we will have Marianne. Marianne, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Fine, thank you.
Okay, we'll get it going here.
Okay. While that's getting loaded up, I'll go ahead and get started. if
Okay.
That's okay. So, good morning, Chairman Withrow, Supervisors, Mr. Hayes, and Mr. Bose. We're here to give an update today on COVID and also touch on a couple of other public health related items that you're hearing in the news that are important to our community. I'm Mary Ann Lilly. I'm here with our Assistant Public Health Officer, Dr. Papazozamenos, and our Public Health Director, Lori Williams. They'll be giving the bulk of the presentation today. But I'm just going to get started. As far as the COVID-19 response, our primary objective remains the same, and that's to reduce the level of disease in the community to protect the capacity of the acute care hospital system for our community. So we continue to do that. We've really been, since we were here talking with you in February and March, we've really been in a time of transition. You know, we talked about how we've been in a pandemic. It's really moving to endemic status, and working on strategies with that transition in terms of what were the primary focus areas and what did that mean in terms of department, as a county department, our operations. So we've been in a lot of transition. But with that primary objective in mind. When we were here a few months back, in that framework of moving forward, there were focus areas and some strategies that were recommended and that you directed us to focus on. So that's really what we've been doing. I'm just going to touch about supporting the medical system. We continue to work with the hospitals and the medical community, the healthcare system, and to make sure we know what their challenges and concerns are, if there are any that we need to be working on, and really moving more and more to relying on the healthcare system. You know, public health had to step up to scale up for a community need over the last 2 years, but some of what we did is really the responsibility of the healthcare community. So really moving more and making sure that they have the information and the resources to support the community. Prevent severe disease with vaccination. While there is an increase in transmission, vaccination still continues to be really effective against severe disease and death. So we continue to encourage vaccination. To support schools, we've continued to work with schools to assure that they have the information and resources they need to support in-person education. Maximize treatment services, doing work with the state, the programs you're going to hear more about in the presentation, as well as working with the healthcare community again to make sure that the resources are available for the community, ensuring community access to testing and PPE. We continue to do that.
There's obviously the rash, which can have, there can be contagious. It can be contagious from the actual rash itself, in which case it will spread by contact. As well as there's a respiratory component. In that case, it's thought to spread through these large respiratory droplets, which, per the CDC director's recent thing, that this usually involves prolonged face-to-face interaction. With the recent cases we are seeing in the U.S., the close physical skin-to-skin contact actually seems to be the predominant mode of transmission, at least among the groups that it's spreading in. So we are seeing it. They're seeing it more in men who have sex with men, or other groups where there may be it's maybe spreading through skin-to-skin close contact. So other ways would be also indirectly touching contaminated materials like bedding or towels or clothing, or other objects which have come into contact with the material from the rash. And it's thought to be much less contagious than COVID-19 and spreads much slower. So in terms of prevention, there are vaccines. So vaccines that are effective for smallpox would actually also be effective for monkeypox. And that's one of the reasons why we may be having, there's concern about more outbreaks with monkeypox in the future, is because in the past people used to be vaccinated against smallpox, and for the most part, most people nowadays are not vaccinated against smallpox. Some of our older generation were vaccinated, but their immunity may be waning, but just not as many people are really immune as much anymore. So prevention involves avoiding close physical contact with people who have symptoms, including sores or rashes, avoiding contact with affected animals and contaminated materials, and for those who do have close contact, wearing the appropriate PPE. For the vaccine that's available through, the vaccine for smallpox is usually usually kept in our national stockpiles, and CDC is distributing it through the appropriate channels so that people who potentially have been exposed in our current outbreak can have access to this. So the vaccine can potentially be used as what we call post-exposure prophylaxis, and then for people who potentially, also could be used potentially as a vaccine for people who are more likely to be come in contact with this.
Okay, well, that concludes our presentation. So at this point, we'll take any questions that you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Mary Ann. And Doctor, tell me your first name. How can I... Thea. Thea, I'm sorry. I'm going to go. It seems like it's a prerequisite for our public health directors to have a name that we can't pronounce.
Probably.
I'm sorry. But Thea, thank you very much. And Lori, thank you very much. Okay, any questions for Vito?
I just want to ask about monkeypox. 1 to 10, how worried should we be, or is this something that...
They are saying that the risk, is considered to be very low right now. Right now, it really does seem to be spreading more through that close physical contact in certain groups. That's not saying that there isn't a, like I said, there is some concern that they've had some concern about maybe in the future monkeypox spreading, because it does have that respiratory component. But right now, they think it's a very low risk for that at this time.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for... just a couple quick ones. With regard to the hospitalization data, as we looked at those graphs, how many of those beds are occupied? I don't know if you guys have this answer. We always ask this. Of the occupied beds, people that have COVID that are there for something else, do we know that when we... I know when somebody gets in there with some other condition, then all of a sudden they test for COVID too, and so now all of a sudden they're a COVID case in the hospital, and I'm wondering just how many of them. Do we ever check that, or?
Yeah, they do. I'm not sure if that, we take a daily, we have a daily bed poll where the hospitals do report to us. I'm not sure if they, so we have in general what their total bed number is, as well as the number of their beds, current number of patients that are COVID positive.
Okay. Okay, so we don't, when we look at that graph, that could be people that are in there with a heart attack and they tested positive for COVID.
Oh, that's what you're, yes, those people do include, those are all of their COVID positives.
Right.
Not just people who were expressly admitted for that.
Perfect. Okay, so we can't tell the difference between it.
Sorry to chime in real quick. I did ask for a specific number recently to see of the hospitalized patients, how many were there as a result of COVID versus in the hospital with COVID and entering the hospital for other conditions. And just in the last couple of weeks, I was informed it was about 50-50 is what I was told. So hopefully that data is still true.
Perfect, very good. And the other thing that's great, I appreciate the therapeutics, you guys talking about that. I know we used to show a percentage of reduction in hospitalizations. When we listed the therapeutics, we would show which therapeutic actually and their percentage of reduction in hospitalizations, but I see we don't have that on here, but maybe next quarter we can get that back in there again, just to kind of shows which is really keeps people out of the hospital. I know it used to be at one point that the monoclonal antibodies had an 85% reduction in hospitalization. So Okay, very good. It's all right. It's okay. Any other questions? Okay, very good. Well, thank you guys very much for that update. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on now to public comments. And this is a period of time on the agenda for anyone to talk about any item that is not on the agenda that we'll be talking about later. And we allow for up to 5 minutes for each one of these public comments. I've got a bunch of cards here, and also just because you didn't fill out a card doesn't mean you can't talk. So we can always have you line up after we go through all the cards. But I'm going to start off with the comment forms that we have here. So the first one we have is Blake Seagraves. Blake, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So I was actually planning on speaking second to my stepfather. He actually has a prequel to what I'm going to say.
You can do that if you want. You
No.
want to switch it around?
I think you'll. Oh, it's up to you. What I'm saying is in addition to him, so just
Perfect.
I
Okay.
just keep that in mind.
Okay.
As we mentioned, my name is Blake Seagraves. I work for a small family company here in Modesto. It's Premgen Corp., also known as Uncle Bub's Nursery. We've been in the Stanislaus County for about 20 years. We were previously a window business, so we've been here for quite some time. Just a small entrepreneurial family in our second generation, trying to potentially make it into a third if we can get some relief and some help with some of the structure regarding the cannabis community. Something that I wanted to point out that is not so much on a local level, but more on a larger scale. I have this pulled up from thecannabisindustry.org. It is a website regarding the Internal Revenue Code 280E. If you just want to note 280E, you could look that up when you have more time. But basically, it breaks down how taxes are allocated and paid for cannabis businesses. This example that is given, it is showing the same sales, the same costs, basically comparing apples to apples, a non-cannabis company to a cannabis company. A non-cannabis company is paying approximately a 30% tax rate, whereas a cannabis company is paying approximately 70%. The reason is not all the same deductions are allowed for a cannabis company compared to a non. And again, because I'm limited in time, I'm not going to read too much of what this is showing, but if you just look up 280E, I'm sure you could find plenty of information regarding that. Something that I do want to quote, just give me 1 second to... So, excuse me. So this was somebody that they interviewed at John Davis, is basically just saying, I'm taxed on nearly double the amount that my business actually makes. And that's just based on, again, doing our taxes. When we look at more of a local level, the fees, how they're structured and how we're paying them, I believe a sliding scale, if that was put in order, could be a little more accurate. What I mean by that is we're paying on a 5,000 square foot canopy while we're utilizing about 60% of that. So it is a fee versus a percentage. So whether we're utilizing that full 5,000 square feet or just the 3 that we are, our fee is the same. Now, of that 3,000 square feet, say a crop comes out bad, say something doesn't sell, or the market shifts, as he's going to mention here in a second. A lot of those are out of our control, but the fees and the structure stays the same. So we're just coming to you to look at some of those facts that are out of our control and are seeking help so we can continue doing business in the Stanislaus County. As I said, we've been here for about 20 years. We'd like to be here for another 20. But that cannot help with the current structure that is in place. There just has to be something that is addressed to how taxes and fees are applied and collected within this community. So that's basically all I wanted to say. And again, that was in addition to what he's going to be bringing up. I just ask that you have an open mind and you compare this now legal business to other legal businesses within the 209 and see if we can't come to a common ground so we can continue doing business. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Blake. And then, this is your father-in-law, I'm sorry?
Yeah, my stepfather, yes.
Okay, come on,
Yeah.
come on up. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm a terrible speaker, so I'll try to muddle through this as best I
No,
can.
that's okay, and your name, I'm sorry?
My name's Frank Edwards.
Frank Edwards.
I'm the
Thanks, Frank.
head owner, head janitor of Premgen Corp. My wife and I appeared before the board, and 2018 on behalf of our new cannabis business, PrimGen Corp. We were excited and proud to be pioneers in this emerging industry and represent Stanislaus County as one of the top candidates. We were referred to as the type of folks that the board wanted to represent the cannabis industry in Stanislaus County. We willingly entered into the development agreement with the county and had every intention of fulfilling our obligations. We made all our payments on time until mid-2021, when the entire industry pretty much crashed. It's pretty much been about a 70% decrease now as compared to when it started. With the decrease in prices and combined with burdening county and state fees, all of us across the industry began to experience extreme financial challenges. When the DA agreement was prepared, the county obtained information from an outside consulting firm. I'm assuming they would make recommendations to the county pertaining to, fee structures and taxing and whatnot. When those agreements were prepared, the price per pound for cannabis was $2,500 to $3,500 a pound. Okay? It roughly costs about $1,000 to produce a pound of cannabis, and as to which 70 to 80% of that is actually sellable product. Now the market prices sit at anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 per pound. That's if you can actually sell your product, because the market is just so flooded with the product. There's numerous illegal black market operations that take place. We understand fair competition, but that only applies if businesses are equally set up to succeed. The cannabis industry is not. At my recent inspection, what we just had recently, the sheriff being one of the entities that inspected my facility, it was kind of a comical comment that he made. He made a comment to me wondering why the black market is thriving so well and the legal industry is struggling. That in itself, you would think, would answer his question. The fact that the black market is rampant, they don't have the overhead, the fees. Us legal folks can't even compete with the black market. In addition to other challenges, it seems every fee associated with this industry is elevated, double, triple, higher rents, more costs for insurances. These fees disproportionately affect our industry compared to other industries. I have a bank account. I have to pay $500 a month to have a bank account. That's if I don't even use it. If I write a check or make a deposit, you get fees associated with that. Other examples, the very beginning of getting these background checks. You can get a typical background check and it costs you about $100, $150. Our industry, it was $1,000 per person and landlords. And then if you had a project across the street, you would have to get another background check. A CEQA thing that we had in our original fees we'd given the county, there was some monies set aside for that to handle our CEQA, which is, I guess, a state mandated thing. And apparently the county submitted it and it didn't work with the state, so the county dropped it in our laps to handle it on our own, as to which there was fees associated with that. I guess that means I'm out of time.
Just go ahead and finish up your thought there, Frank, that's okay.
And just several other difficulties we faced. In the early ons, one of the board members visited my facility and made me aware of a large illegal grow that was right next to my facility. Upon the board member visiting my place, he made me aware of it and informed me the place was going to be busted within 30 days. That stretched out to 3-4 months. During that time, the illegal pesticides that illegal grow used drifted into my facility, devastated my facility, ruined every piece of crop I had, lost the crop, and had to pay several thousands of dollars to have a remediation company come through and decontaminate my facility. That was the first big hit that a fledgling company is how do you survive that? So we've muddled through, my wife and I, we've sold everything we've had. I've sold 3 properties to invest in this company to right this sinking ship. And there's nothing left. Realizing that the industry is in a state of collapse, the state has been giving relief to us folks, reducing their fees, waiving fees. I would hope the county would follow suit. It's comical to me that the state is, if you have a felony record, you know, they're issuing permits. And in this county, I had to disclose traffic tickets and was considered the type of folks y'all wanted. So obviously we're looking relief. I speak on the industry in this county, not just speaking on my own behalf. I'm sure some of you folks in districts have heard from other licensees venting the same issues. In contrast,
Frank, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to
okay.
get you to, sorry. I'm just,
Okay, well, thanks for letting me speak what I did, and hopefully we can get some sort of resolve.
all right, I'm sorry, Vito?
Yep. It's not responding specifically to you, but to the industry. Right now, I'm on the CSAC, which is the State Supervisors Association. It's a cannabis working group looking at legislation for potential relief statewide. And then locally, I know we've said this many times, that we continue to look at, people. I think there was the will from this board to go to a tax rather than a development agreement, because you pay for the full amount, the 5,000 square feet. In the development agreement based on what was originally signed. So I think it'll be fair, and then we continue to look at ways to enhance the ability of people to stay in business. So that's just a few things that are going on, but legislatively at the state, along with the governor's office trying to figure out generally. But I will say, again, for the sheriff's department, we have put a lot of money in, and the sheriff has put a tremendous amount of effort to put the illegal black market out of business. I can't think of another county that's put more effort into doing that, and I think it's actually paying some dividends. So we're willing to continue to look forward and work with all of our development agreements.
I was asking urgency as far as, because as of right now, we're all being penalties and interest, and I mean, each minute goes by, our fees are increasing due to late fees and penalties, and so that's why I almost requested an emergency vote or some sort of emergency relief.
Very good. All right, Frank, thank you. Thanks for coming down. Take care. Thank you, guys. Okay, next one up I have is Barbara Nunes. Barbara, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Well, thank you.
Good.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Barbara, and I am an IHS Provider here in Modesto, and a member of the union, UDW. I care for my 26-year-old daughter, who is disabled and has been since birth. A lot of people don't know what IHS providers do. It's understandable because most of us are at home taking care of our children or our elderly relatives and not really visible to the public. Home care is many different things. The best way to summarize home care is that it's anything an older person or person with disabilities needs to stay safely in their home. IHSS care is unique for each client, and that's what makes it special. The individualized care we provide allows our clients to live at home in the comfort and dignity and to avoid expensive institutional care. My daughter is a social butterfly. She loves people, so if she was in an institution, I believe she would not be the same loving, sweet young lady that she is now. People 65 and over are the fastest growing age group in our state. California's senior population is expected to grow from 6 million to 9 million over the next decade. We don't have enough home care providers to take care of everyone in Stanislaus County who need it now. The California State Auditor found that in 2019, before the pandemic, over 430,000 assessed hours were unmet. Can you imagine that number now since the pandemic, and some of these people have been locked in their homes for over 2 years? That's an increase of over 200,000 since 2015. We need more IHSS providers, not less. But it is almost impossible to get people to work for minimum wage or a little above. But the low pay is making it very difficult for those of us doing the work and keep doing it, and make it very unlikely that we will attract enough new workers to meet the new county's care needs. Now that our contract negotiations have begun, we have a great opportunity to work together to protect our shared future. Please work with us to negotiate a contract with a modest wage increase that rewards our current IHSS workforce and attract new providers. Especially, like I said, during the pandemic, we became essential workers. A lot of people had never heard of us, but we had to go into homes where people were deathly afraid to be around anyone, but we were the ones taking care of them and making sure that they didn't end up in the hospital with COVID. A lot of them were afraid to have us come in, so a lot of us lost our jobs, as many other people. But we became essential workers, and a few more people started to know what we actually do and how beneficial we are to the community. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay, next up I have is Terry Walker Dampian. Terry, good morning again.
Good morning again. Good morning, Chairman and Supervisors, Board of Supervisors. I'm here again. My name is Terry Walker Dampier, and I'm a provider here in Stanislaus County, and I'm a member of our great union, United Domestic Workers. And we're here today just to let you know that the IHSS program is struggling to get to our current pay of $15.50. We need a modest increase to afford to live in this county. The work we do in this county, the work we do is a community service. We help our county seniors, people with disabilities, live at home, close to their families, and to do the things that give their lives meanings, as Barbara once said before me. IHS Providers make Stanislaus County stronger, healthy, and kinder. We make it a better place to live. But we are getting too priced out for this county. At $15.50, it is only 50 cents more than the minimum wage. We are some of the lowest paid workers in the state. That doesn't seem right. Do it? Or does it? Okay. So with inflation and the skyrocketing of gas, a lot of us live in this county are working hard, but it's getting further and further behind. We can't afford our bills. Many of us are making hard choices between buying such much needed things as medicines and buying healthy foods. When workers like us pay our bills, not pay our bills, our community suffer because local business can't stay open if we can't shop there. IHSS caregivers provide a vital service for our county. We care for people in their home so they can live in comfort and dignity. And if we're for IHSS, our clients are mighty has a living. If we don't care for them, they would have to live in institutions. And we don't want that. That's very high paying for our county. The work we do help everyone. Please work with us for our contract that we will be respected. We do, and we help us all to pay our bills. Thank you for this space, and you have a blessed and wonderful day.
Thank you, Terry. You too.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up I have Gwendolyn Bird. There we go. There it is. Gwendolyn, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Gwendolyn Bird, and I'm an IHSS provider in Patterson, California, a member of my union, UDW. I care for my brother in my home who was once homeless, and we didn't know where he was at after my mom had passed. So we found him, and I took him into my home with an amputated leg, and just recently he had brain surgery. But with all that being said, IHSS caregivers in this county make only $15.50. That doesn't go very far when the average rent here in Modesto is over $1,500. So we are here today to encourage you to work with us on a new IHSS contract that will help Stanislaus County recruit and retain enough IHSS providers to meet the current and future need of our county. As you know, IHSS isn't just only funded by Stanislaus County, but the county share of IHSS only 16%, and that share is paid through a dedicated funding sourced the state up in 1991. So every dollar invested by the county is matched by $5.25 in federal and state money. That means each dollar the county spends on IHSS generates a huge return in the form of federal and state matching funds. So those dollars will go directly back into our local economy and help our local businesses thrive. So right now, with inflation and high gas prices, helping local businesses is more important than ever. So IHSS caregivers like me provide a vital service for the county. So we care for people in their home so they can live in comfort and dignity. If it wasn't for IHSS provider, our clients might have to live in an expensive institution at taxpayers' expense. So this is important work. So please support us by bargaining a contract with a fair wage increase. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Gwendolyn. Okay. Next up, we have Joni Grebe. Joni, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. So I want to follow up to the quarterly update on COVID from Public Health and provide you guys with some information that they did not provide to you in their update. So according to a recent CDC study on seroprevalence of infection, which is a survey that estimates the proportion of the population in all 50 states that has infection-induced antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 by testing for anti-nucleocapsid antibodies, which are produced in response to infection, but are not produced in response to vaccination. This study found from December 2021 to February 2022, the seroprevalence in our school-aged kids from 0 to 11 years of age increased from 44.2% to 75.2%. What does that mean? An estimated 75% of our 0 to 11-year-olds have had natural infection. They have natural immunity. For our 12 to 17-year-olds, the seroprevalence increased from 45.6% to 74.2%, according to this study. And yet, for some reason, the CDC, in this same study, still states at the end that this should not be interpreted as protection and that vaccination remains the safest strategy of prevention of hospitalization among children. I won't say any more about that. Okay, so let me now give you a little bit of information about this current uptick that, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but that she referenced this little increase that we're seeing. So we have seen case rates climbing all over the state right now. Even our governor, fully vaccinated and boosted, just had COVID. But according to the state COVID-19 California Case Statistics Dashboard, the most recent cases on a 7-day average, Santa Clara County leads the states with 53 cases per 100,000, San Francisco County at 51 cases per 100,000, and San Mateo at 51 cases per 100,000. Those are the top 3 highest case rates in our state as of right now. In our county, we rank 36 on case rate averages as of right now, as of today, which I find perplexing because Santa Clara, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties are in the top 5 vaccinated counties in the state. They have vaccination rates of 88.5 to 87% of their population fully vaccinated. The highest vaccinated counties across the state all have the highest case rates right now. So we only have roughly 60% of our population fully vaccinated, and that's quite mind-bending to me that there are 35 other counties that have higher vaccination rates than us, and yet there are also 35 counties that have higher infection rates than us right now. So she didn't give you guys that information. So I wanted to make sure that you did have a really good idea of where we're at in our county. We're doing great. We're doing great. She didn't say that to you guys, but I know I'm not a public health expert, so I'm not trying to come across as arrogant. I don't know more than her, but I do know how to read, as one of my friends once told me. I know how to read. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, we can't just look at case rates. We need to consider hospitalization. We need to consider death rates. And I would like to remind you that that is exactly what so many of us health professionals begged for our policies to be based off of since the beginning. But instead, our state policies and mandates were based solely off of case rates. And were based off of that wildly unreasonable color-coded tier metric. Do you guys remember that? That was only case rates. Nothing else was considered. My kids were kept out of school for an entire year based solely off of case rates. And that purple, which became the deep purple, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara, they are beyond the deep purple. They're like in the blackest of the black if we were to go back to that color-coded tier metric. Yeah. So that was also information that she didn't provide to you guys. I know I've been very critical of our CDPH, but we must be proactive now so that we do not repeat our past mistakes. We must advocate for education and not mandates. We must recognize that all work and every worker is essential, that the ability to pay your bills and put food on your table is essential, and that right should never, ever be infringed upon again. As a county, we must always stand up for personal liberties, stand against discrimination, stand against coercion, stand against harassment, stand against medical segregation. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jody. Okay, next up I have Joseph Monteroso.
Well, as you can see, I'm back.
It's okay, how are you?
I might go a minute over. Gentlemen, what are we doing about resolving the situation on Old Colony Road?
Mr. Monteroso, I'm going to have you move a little closer to that mic, just over that way, a little perfect. Okay.
I certainly want you to hear me.
Thank you.
What are we doing about resolving the situation on Old Colony Road? It's been 7 months, going on 8 months since this matter has come up. You have a package in front of you, again. To refresh your memory, I spoke before this board on May 24th. when I asked for a resolution regarding the dirt strip adjacent to my property and 6 others that live on the dirt strip on Horseshoe Road. The dirt strip currently has many imminent dangers that put me at risk for liability. Unfortunately, I have received nothing from the Board of Supervisors, City Council, Public Works, etc. Mr. Todd James, Assistant County Counsel, sent an email dated May 18 to my legal team, asking if there was a possibility of a compromise. Mr. Markowitz replied with an email and made 2 phone calls to Mr. James, email included, you can see that. However, to date, he has received no response. Why? What's the problem with that? What is going on? Why is there no response from Public Works or the Board of Supervisors? Why has the county been so unresponsive to my request for a decision on the matter? Mr. Lehman and Supervisor Buck Condon wasted no time responding to the property owners with no interest or liability in the strip. Mr. Lehman and Supervisor Buck Condon showed bias in visiting a select few residents in the area, and promises were made to them, yet I was not given the courtesy of a return call. Instead, he told them that he was ignoring me. Please note that the recent photos that you have in front of you, there's one there was 7 people in a golf cart on that dirt strip. That strip is also bordered by a great deal of water on the ditch from the OID. I included in there just a brief government a report on how easy it is for these side-by-sides to flip over. Why are you allowing the situation to continue? I don't understand that. When will common sense apply and the dirt strip be closed? The dirt strip is narrow, full of potholes and ruts, with a deep ditch that's filled with water. This is a recipe for a tragic death that I am desperately trying to avoid. 7 months have passed since Mr. Lehman weighed into this matter. What is the county's position? I just need to know that, one way or the other. If we're going to go to court, I'm ready, willing, and able to do so. I'm hoping that we don't. I'm hoping that common sense prevails and you guys can see that this is not worth spending taxpayers' money or my money to solve. It's just not necessary. 7 months should be enough time to make a decision, I would think, even for the government. 5 of the 7 adjacent property owners have signed consent to close the dirt strip. Oakdale Irrigation has signed to close the dirt strip. The dirt strip is not and never has been a public road. I think we all know that by now, for sure, don't we? The remaining 2 property owners have said they will consent if the county does not indemnify them. They do not understand that the county will not pay for their legal fees. That some neighbors think this is a public path. It is not. It is a private easement and has been for the last 83 years since you allegedly did some maintenance on it. The county has misled them into thinking it is a public road or will become a public road. My time is up. I've got 1 paragraph to go.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The county has no intent to accept total liability and is not feasible to upgrade the dirt strip to a public road. Remember, the dirt strip has not been maintained for 83 years. The status quo cannot continue. The 7 property owners adjacent to the dirt strip will be held liable if anyone is hurt or killed on the dirt strip. The county has no right to expose us to such risk, and the county is solely responsible for preventing us from protecting ourselves. What must I do to get a response? I have followed all of the administrative procedures that are required. There's only one thing left, and that's to take it to court. And I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that you understand, or maybe some of you don't understand, what we're dealing with out there. It's not worth what we're going through at this point. It's certainly not going to worth me to spend $50,000 or $100,000 on legal fees, which I'm prepared to do. And of course, your legal fees are all paid by us anyway. So please help me get it resolved. Give me an answer, one way or another, so we can take this to the next level if we need to. There's a couple of paragraphs more, but you guys have them in front of you. Read them at your leisure. Maybe you can nudge Tom there to do something about this when you get a minute. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Please, spare yourselves that, and me, that visit, please. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Monteroso. Okay, next up, we have Miguel DeNoso. Good morning, Miguel. How are you?
Fine, sir. Thank you very much. The question that we're supposed to have in our presentation for the board supervisor, who controls the board supervisor? Everybody say, maybe 90% say the people, because the people elect your representatives. That's the so-called democratic process. But the reality is not true. Who controls the Stanislaus government? Number one, the Mr. Hayes. Number two, the chief office of the county. Number three, the department directors, each department directors. Number four, the board supervisor. And the last is the citizen. The meetings like that, and here, 9 o'clock in the morning, very few can come to the meeting. Very few. The majority are members from the staff and interest groups, but not the community. Only maybe 2 or 3 people. 2 or 3 people really, or 5. In every meeting, even at 6 o'clock. So who controls the whole over $2 billion money? Mr. Hayes. And who is the rubber stamp? The board supervisor. I'm telling you straight, I'm not too much politician in that. I like to come in here and put your things to work in sense. The $50 million process that you're doing in regard to the infrastructure is failing. It's failing because continue to be controlled by the chief executive board. They manipulate and work the time, the place, and who can participate and who cannot participate. And make it in a cross-landing building, agriculture building, the majority of the so-called public coming or public participation. 11 people there working for the consultant employees. 3 or 4 people, maybe 5 go to the meeting. But in the morning or in the night. In the morning it's 10:30, the night maybe 6 o'clock. But still, very few have over 25 people in one meeting. The rest is nothing. So the engagement, the outreach, and the part of the so-called participation of the county government to be closer to the committee is not there. Very few people can go to this meeting. People from Grayson, Whaley had to come to the county agriculture. People from Empire had to go to agriculture center. Why not it's in the school where the people live? Why not in the churches where the people live? Why not in the library that's very close and not the community? No, you put it over there. in an agriculture building. That's a big joke. So pretending that you're going to help us with the $50 million is questioning. And I hope that you start to open the transparency and give the people the right and the equal participation, because we are not equal participation. We are less participation because of the control of Mr. Hayes in the Chief Executive Office. You guys are just receiving the report, reading for a few minutes, if you have the time to read it. But really to go to the participation of the committee, only one time is you got to do that. When you guys go to the so-called supervisor sense of community in one time 4 o'clock and one day 6 o'clock, and was thank you to Mr. Chan Candy. Very few. And this is for many years. I never see that before, but not really. So I hope that you feel guilty as a board member or supervisor to do a better job and not allow Mr. Hayes to continue with the chief office to control the whole process or so-called democratic process. Even in the agenda, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and pack like this morning, or issues of the consent agenda. So very few people have the power of understanding what's mean the consent agenda. And yet, the agenda, half of the agenda is under the consent, meaning the people don't have a chance even to say nothing. And that's my point. Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Miguel. Just to set the record straight on the meetings, we have had meetings that we've had so far with regard to the 50 million. We've had them at churches so far. We've had them in parking lots of churches, inside churches. We've had them in the middle of the streets of the neighborhoods. So I can't sit and just let those comments go without, they're just not true. So, okay.
Can I get a public announcement in? I know it comes later.
Perfect. We do have another one. Go ahead.
Tomorrow, Wednesday at 9 o'clock, we're meeting in the Kenwood Avenue neighborhood in Turlock, Mitchell, corner of Mitchell and Star, and then at 10 o'clock, we're meeting at Montana Park at 1001 in Turlock. I want you to know that my wife and I walked both of those neighborhoods Saturday and Sunday, handed out flyers to every single house to make sure that there was participation. And if they couldn't, I let them know if they couldn't be there because the timing is bad. No matter when you have it, the timing is not good in the middle of the day, where they could provide comments and or they could give me comments and I would share them with the rest of the board. So that's tomorrow. And then we're headed to 11 o'clock to Fairview Park, the corner of Tuscan Avenue and Placer Avenue in Modesto.
Very good. Thanks, Vito. So those are the last 3 that we have of the 7 that we have had so far. Oh, is it 4 tomorrow?
4?
I think it's 3.
3.
I think it's 3, yeah. Those are our last 3. We've had 7 so far already out there all over the county. And like I said, in the middle of streets of neighborhoods. And I'm very proud of the efforts that our staff have done to make these meetings happen. And it's all about, and we've had all kinds of engagement to try to let people know we're coming. So anyway, very proud of what we're doing and very contrary to what you just heard at the podium. So thank you. Okay, that's the last speaker card I had. We have a couple speaker cards on some specific items on the agenda. Is there anybody else that would like to come and speak? Come on down.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you all?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Megan Short. I just wanted to come share. Are you guys aware that we are not tracking the suicide rates of our children in this county? No? Not aware? Yeah. I thought that was a little disturbing myself. So I had sent a FOIA to the Sheriff's Department asking for some specific information, and it was actually sent over to County Health. And County Health responded back that the sheriff doesn't track that. I find that concerning that we can track the whole nation with COVID and with all these other things, but we're not tracking that. So I'm curious, how do we get data? How are we properly allocating money if we don't know? I mean, just recently we gave $5 million to ARPA for the underserved community. I feel that the mental health crisis is definitely a part of the underserved community. We have a huge mental health crisis in this county, and our children are greatly affected by that. So That's all. I just wanted to share that with you. Thought it was a little concerning that we're not tracking that.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Megan. Anybody else like to speak, for which I don't have a card here? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to our next item, our consent calendar. We have a couple things going on here on the consent calendar today. I think we're going to need to pull items D1 and B5. I think B5 is one that Mr. DeNoso wants to speak on also. And D1, we have a couple conflicts between myself and Supervisor Chiesa. So maybe we could go through the entire consent calendar, look for a motion for everything besides D1 and B5, and then maybe we can do D1. Okay, so we'll look for a motion.
Motion to accept all consent items other than D1 and D5.
Second.
We have a motion.
Miguel wants to talk on one of them, right?
We pulled up.
On B5, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the consent calendar with the exceptions of D1 and B5. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Very good. Okay, why don't we, on D1, I have a conflict. The individual, Joe Ruddy Corporation, is a client of mine, and I think Supervisor Chiesa has a...
Same thing, client.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to step out for a second just for this vote, and then we will come right back, and Supervisor Condit will jump in here.
All right. So we have item D1, the approval to rescind a portion of the Williamson Act contract. I'm going to, before we open it to the public, does any board members have any comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll open it to the public. Does anyone have any comments on item D1? Okay, seeing none from the public, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve item D1.
Second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Buck. All right. Motion passes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chance. Okay, now let's move on to item B5. We're going to pull item B5 for comment. Mr. DeNoso, come on back up.
I hope that Mr. Chairman, that the staff and the consultant, after finishing the report in regard to the $50 million, you're going to see the difference. And you're very close, send it online to you, but it's okay, that's politics. Mr. Chairman, under the economic package, it's big, very big. So I tried under the agenda to pull off on the agenda in regard to the giving information to the public. You can open it because it's too big. You cannot open this information for the public. It's not allowed. I want to make is just this morning in regard to the COVID-19 report, never mentioned the Latino, Mexican, American, and Mexican was over 70% in one time affecting the COVID-19. Never mentioned in this report meeting. And the same applied to this one. Never mentioned at this Mexican and Mexican, American, Latino in this report. Never. And you have the employment, you have the workforce, you have the education, you have the housing, everything, but never demographic, who really are the workers, who are the movers of the industry employing workers, the essential workers, who are really behind this thing in regard to the education. Never mentioned the Mexican-American community. And this economic committee, executive committee, it's only 3, maybe Mexican-American, most are like calling themselves Latinos or Hispanic, but not Mexican-American. So it's questioning even the report of your committee. It not really represent the community. If we are over 55% population of Mexican-American and Mexican in the community, we not have representation. And it's very common that you have, the first you have to do is put a committee. And the majority of the committee are themselves the government representation, meaning all the cities in the county have the power to control 3 or 4 residents that are supposed to be in the committee. It's typical, and that's very close to the Stenco. It's the same concept. You pretend that you have the board for the people. No, you're not doing that, because very few people go to the meeting too. So for people to understand this report, it's very important, because we're talking about the economic in the future of the 2020, 2027, almost 5 years. Very few people are going to come every year to discuss and understanding your economic that you're going to report. Very few. But this report, again, has been controlled by Mr. Hayes and the Chief Executive Committee or Board of Employees. So if somebody come here today, very few understand here, very few. And when you do it, 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, that way that person, the work or want to come here, he can afford it to be here. So Mr. Chairman, I don't want it to be so negative, but I'm telling you the reality, the politics, and the manipulation of the process that we are not being transparency, and know how the process really involving the community. He's talking about millions and billions of dollars. Not there. And now you say, well, we have 3 or 4 meetings. That's nothing. We're talking about 525,000 residents. And you only have close to 100, maybe 200, in regard to the $50 million. That's nothing, really, to be honest with you. And you say, okay, we have the consultant. Yes, a very good group, the consultant. The employees are trying to do the best, but not close to the reality. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Miguel. Okay, any other questions or comments with regard to item B5? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Look for a motion.
Motion to approve item B5.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to our discussion items. Oh, I'm sorry. We have an item too late for the agenda. Sorry.
I'm sorry, a little off script this morning. So good morning, board members, and once again, just want to let you know that we did have an item that has come forward. We would like to place on this agenda today as an item too late for the agenda, and this is a 2-step process. The first step in this process is to consider placing this on the agenda for consideration. Once you've voted on that, we will then present the item and seek your approval of that item. So this is the first step in that process, and this is to approve to add an item too late for this agenda, and that approval of that item is to amend the 2022 meeting calendar for the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors and to effectively cancel the meeting on June 21st of 2022. So we just had information that came to our attention just yesterday that requires us to seek this approval, recognizing that we've had some unforeseen circumstances with board member calendars, and we are not confident that we can conduct next week's board meeting as planned to approve all of the items that would come before the board next week. So with that, we would ask that you add this matter too late for the agenda, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Jody? Anybody from the audience? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion on item on too late for the agenda A.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. Very good. Let's move on to item too late for the agenda B.
Okay, thank you very much. As I just stated, we had information come to our attention after the posting of this week's agenda to indicate that we have some issues with board participation in next week's meeting that we would recommend would result in the cancellation of next week's meeting. We have reviewed all of our agenda matters that were pending for next week, and we're confident that we can move those back by 1 week, and it will have no technical repercussions for the organization. We will have a busy meeting that following week, but I think every board member is okay with that, and okay with having a busy meeting. But we would recommend that you amend your 2022 meeting calendar for the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors to cancel the meeting on June 21st, 2022, and the clerk has provided an agenda item along with an updated meeting calendar for this calendar year. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Jody. Any questions for Jody from the board? Anybody from the audience? Any questions? Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My quick question is there a specific date that this meeting is going to be rescheduled for so I can update my own calendar?
Go ahead.
So the answer is we will not be adding another meeting to the calendar. We have a calendar designed to make sure that we can approve the flow of items that come before the board throughout the entire year, and we're confident that by moving all of the items from the 21st to the 28th, that we'll be able to do so without adding another meeting.
Okay, well, I guess because I didn't have the meeting for the 28th on my calendar. So, okay, so I understand it now. Thank you very much.
Welcome. And just for clarification, the meeting on the 28th is a morning meeting, so we'll be here meeting at our normal 9 a.m. time on June 28th.
Thanks, Stephen. Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move on to our discussion items. Item 6.1, approval to rehire Tamara Carmelek. Am I saying that right? Richard, you're going to save me on the...
Carmelek.
Carmelek, I did it. Yes. How are you, Richard?
I'm good, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, CEO Hayes, and County Counsel Thomas Bose. Good morning. Richard Murdoch, Stanislaus County Fire Warden and OES, as well as the interim SR 911 Director. So this discussion item before you is an approval to rehire Tamara Carmelek prior to the 180-day sit-out period as required by the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. Tamara has 18 years of public safety dispatch experience. She started at Stanislaus Regional 911 in April 2004 as an emergency call taker. She retired in March 2022 as an emergency dispatcher 3. Her final rate of pay was $37.78 per hour, and staff is recommending a starting salary of $38.92 per hour, which is the current emergency dispatcher 3 step 5 hourly rate. It is a higher rate than Tamara was earning when she retired on March 30th, 2022. At that time, she was an emergency dispatcher 3 step 5, earning $37.78 per hour. And on March 17, 2022, the board approved the labor agreement between the County of Stanislaus and the Stanislaus Regional Emergency Dispatchers Association. And one of those provisions of this labor agreement was a 3% salary increase. And so this increased the emergency dispatcher 3 step 5 hourly rate to $38.92 per hour. And this salary increase was effective the first pay period following the Board of Supervisors approval. So as you've probably heard and are aware, we are at a critical staffing level in SR 911. We are working diligently in order to recruit and retain the current staff that we have. And by us certifying the rehiring of Tamara Carmelek as an emergency dispatcher 3, it is very necessary for us in order to complete of the 180-day sit-out period pursuant to PEPRA. And so very vital for us to have her as a part-time dispatcher. It reduces our time of training and time that needs to be spent with her. And so we're asking the board to approve this item as listed here on the agenda.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Richard. Any questions for Richard? Seeing none. Any questions, comments from the audience? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Look for a motion.
Motion to approve item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you, Richard. Okay, we're going to move on to item B2, approval of a master property tax revenue agreement between Stanislaus County and the 9 cities.
Hey, before you start, I forgot one thing. We just appointed a new county surveyor, Chad Johnson, who's sitting back there. I just wanted to wave your hand. That's a big deal.
Congratulations, Chad. Very good.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's good. Very good. Okay, now we'll move on to item B2.
Okay, good morning, members of the board and everyone who's here with us this morning. Thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to present what we consider to be a pretty exciting conclusion to a long process here in working with our local cities. So I'm going to present this item, and a little bit later I'm going to ask one of our negotiating team members, Brian Whitemeyer from the city of Oakdale, to join us, and we have other city managers present with us as well, and they're all invited to provide any comment that they would like as well. But I'm going to go ahead and take us through some of the basic components of our property tax sharing agreement with all 9 of our cities, or that will be made available to all 9 of our cities. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I think anytime you have a conversation on local revenue sharing, particularly around property tax, you really have to start with an acknowledgement of where we are situated in our community versus the rest of communities in the state of California. And the current property tax distribution system was designed and implemented a little over 40 years ago. And it is the result of tax reform that was brought on with Prop 13, as well as the legislation that was required to implement Prop 13 and distribute local taxes in California under AB 8. So you'll oftentimes hear about AB 8. That is the legislation required to implement Proposition 13. The results of that tax reform and implementation created an unequal sharing distribution of property taxes here in California. You've heard us talk about this at many of our budget hearings, but it really is a central focal point that's necessary to have this conversation around how to share revenues. Stanislaus County receives approximately 12% of our total property tax allocations locally. That places us 45 out of 58 counties. I want to acknowledge that previously we were further down that list until many years ago when we were successful in reversing what is called negative bailout, which was an additional penalty that applied to Stanislaus County. And I want to just take a moment and recognize our Vito Chiesa, our board member who served as the president of the California State Association of Counties and fought hard for this many years ago. So although 12% is not where we want to be on this list, we were actually lower on that list in years past. Cities receive 5.7% of total property tax allocations, and that places cities on average in our community about 26 out of 58 counties. These numbers really just recognize that in our community, when we talk about how you're going to split up the pie, there's just a general recognition that we start with a smaller pie than most other communities throughout this entire state, making our jobs even more difficult to have these types of conversations. Next thing I want to acknowledge is, well, what is the purpose of a property tax sharing agreement? And the law does provide for the opportunity for counties to reach in advance a master property tax sharing agreement, which you can have in place in the event that there is a future annexation, and it provides for the opportunities to negotiate in advance, should a city wish to annex additional unincorporated areas, exactly how we will perform some of those revenue sharing functions. The law does not require that we have this agreement in place. So it's important to note that both parties freely enter these agreements, and we do so because we feel that they provide for the most efficient and secure projections for future growth and development. Development really requires certainty to proceed, and the more certain we can be in our relationships between county and city, the better atmosphere we can provide for our local development community and the orderly fashion and the planning upon which we build out our local community. Our first tax sharing agreements were implemented between 1980 and 1990, and they did vary by city. Most of our agreements split the difference, or split our gross and our base and our increment, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment. About 66-34, 66% for the county, 34% for cities. Some of them were 80-20, 80 to the county and 20% to the cities. I want to explain what the term increment is, because you're going to hear that occasionally when you go through these conversations and probably when you read our staff report. Increment is simply the changes in the value of property tax distribution on any given year. Generally, it's an increase. So increment, we usually think of, it's property tax increases and value increases. However, in some years, and we've experienced this certainly over the last 25 years, you will see declines as well. So increment can go both up and can go down. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the current agreement that's in place. This was executed with all 9 cities in 1996 at various months throughout the year. So not everybody has the same exact date, but generally in 1996, all 9 cities executed new agreements with Stanislaus County for master property tax sharing. That agreement was amended in 2006 with all parties to fix the technical interpretation issues of the agreement. In the current agreement, so all of the annexations that have occurred since the cities signed those agreements, the county does retain all of our base property tax funding. That's really important because when property transfers over, we still have some obligations to perform services for that area. So it's important for us to at least retain the base funding that supports our base budgets here at the county and that we're not moving backwards due to annexations. However, the real upside and the real potential for revenue in any of these agreements is the increment and the growth over time through the development of property. In the current agreement, we split that growth prior to reductions for what's called ERAF on a 70-30 basis. So we were commonly referred to as we have a 70-30 property tax sharing agreement. We do have some separate agreements negotiated in some areas. Just a few examples. We've done some one-off agreements, particularly around commercial developments that didn't require as much impact on county services. We've done some in Modesto as well as most recently in Newman. Go ahead. It's important to understand what the impact is of what we call ERAF, the Educational Augmentation Fund. It's important to understand this because it really does factor into what is the net benefit for cities and the county as you implement an agreement like this. So with all of the legislation that's occurred through the years, in the early 90s, ERAF came into play, and basically it requires the county to distribute a portion of our property tax into a specific fund to support the state's general fund obligations towards local education, as well as community colleges and university systems. So we are required to make those deposits. Cities are also required. The key difference is that we're required to deposit 55% of our property tax into ERAF, while cities are only required to deposit 26%. So for every dollar of property tax that we decide to share out with cities, actually more money is retained in the community. That was a driving factor for us in wanting to reach, some consideration in a new agreement, recognizing that we would be able to maintain additional revenues here in our local community, which benefits all cities as well as our broad community. In the current agreement, for every $1 million in growth, cities net about $946 after this transfer for ERAF, and the county nets $891. So that places us, although we call it a 70-30 agreement, that places us generally closer to about a 52-48% agreement, with the cities actually just above 50%. Since 1996, we've had about 100 tax rate areas that have been formed through these annexations. They started with a base value of about $266 million over time. Our numbers actually don't go all the way back to 1996, but these are the numbers that we have that go back at least until about the early 2000s. The combined value as of last fiscal year was about $6.2 billion. So you can see the level of growth that has occurred over the last 25 years as a result of annexations and developments in our community. The county's received an estimated $56.8 million in growth over that period of time. Cities have received about $65.4 million. Those numbers aren't going to line up entirely perfect because we do have some one-off agreements where we treat some properties a little bit different. But these are the best numbers that our county auditor controller was able to pull together to describe what has been the impact of the current agreement that we have in place. Okay, so we'll move on to the proposed agreement. We've been working for some time. I'm going to leave it to Mr. Whitemeyer to describe what that process has been like. But it has been a long effort and conversations, many different versions of conversations with cities around what could potentially result in a new agreement, which is before you today. And here are some of the basic components of that new agreement. This new agreement will be effective with the 2022 assessment roll, so property values as of January 1st, 2022, that will really impact this upcoming fiscal year's budget, fiscal year 22-23. The agreement will continue until one of the parties terminates, so it has essentially kind of an evergreen clause to it. Generally applies to properties annexed following the effective date of the 96 agreement. That was a unique feature of this negotiated agreement, that we're actually going back to prior annexations and improving the tax sharing ratio for cities going all the way back to those annexations into 1996. In the new agreement, the county will continue to retain all of our base property tax funding, and the split of increment will now be at 50-50 for both the county and the city, not just for future annexations, but also for all of those properties that were annexed back to the 1996 agreements. After you run through those ERAF reductions, the net effect of this is approximately 68% to cities and 32% to counties of the incremental growth. We do retain the base, as we have in the past, but of future growth and changes, it'll be about 68% city and about 32% county. It's important to note that annexations that include county islands would require a separate agreement. There are actually some cases in which we may do something more beneficial to cities in certain unincorporated islands, so we make sure we carve those out for separate negotiations. We also have some clauses for specific areas that would be subject to separate negotiations. Some of them are listed on the screen there, but there are particular areas that all parties recognize would be better suited through a separate negotiation process, so we do identify that in these agreements as well. Fiscal impact is very difficult to project on something like this, and you just have to acknowledge that the biggest impact fiscally for both cities and the county really depends upon the future growth of each individual city, which is highly specific to that particular city. So we are unable to predict with certainty in the next 5 to 10, 15 years how any particular city will develop and what are the valuations of development over time. What we can do is we can look at what developments have already occurred, and we can go back over the last 5 years to say, well, if we had made this change 5 years ago, what would the fiscal impacts have been? And then how can we use those to project, at least into this next fiscal year, what we think the next fiscal year would change in terms of a minimum impact. So that's the work that was done by our Auditor Controller's Office. And going forward, when you look at 70% to 50%, for every $1 million in growth, cities are going to net about $13.65, and we're at $6.37. That kind of just describes the 68-32 split. Next slide. This is the auditor's analysis that I was referring to. Looking back over that last 5 years, we're projecting that county growth would have been reduced in revenue by about $1.3 million per year, while the city's increased revenue would have been about $2.1 million. And the reason there's that difference is because cities are paying less into ERAF. And that's one of the driving forces and motivations for us to consider this agreement, is that at least in this particular model, on average, we would have retained about $800,000 more per year in our community to benefit our local cities, which is a good thing. Okay, you're not going to be able to read this on the screen, but I wanted to include the slide just to show you what the auditor's analysis was, and to also show you that it is a part of our board agenda packet, so you're encouraged to review the agenda packet itself. You can see individual cities by individual city, what that 5-year analysis looks like, and you immediately recognize when you look at some of these details that not all cities are equal in this fashion. Some cities have grown a lot more over the last 5 to 15, 20 years than other cities. And those cities that have grown the most in the last 20 years, and the two that are kind of, I think, at the top of this list are Turlock and Patterson, although they may not be the largest in population, they have had the largest valuation growth. So on the short term, they would probably stand to gain the most from this agreement. However, in the long term, it really is those cities that have development plans in the near future that will actually benefit the most from this agreement over the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm sorry you can't read all of that. It wasn't really intended to be able to read on a screen, but just to highlight, this is attached to the agenda item, and you can go and look at it individually. Go ahead, Patrick. Our timeline, so in this case, we really need to align this work with our annual budgeting process. And we looked at, how late could we go into the process in preparation of our final budget, which goes to the board in September. How late could we go to determine whether or not cities will sign on to this agreement or not? And the date that we came up with was July 20th. And so what this does is this allows, subject to board approval today, and we are hopeful that you'll approve all staff recommendations, but subject to board approval, we will have until July 20th to work with each of our individual 9 cities to finalize the agreements and to have them take it before their respective city councils and authorize their city managers to sign the agreement. If we are unable to secure an agreement prior to July 20th, then what we'll need to do is wait till the next fiscal year to reconsider the agreement with that particular city. The reason that's important is we need to know what to put in our budget. We have, you're going to see a budget presentation right after this, and included in that budget presentation is a recognition that we have almost $10 million in unmet needs for county departments that were declined in this current round of the budget. And if we do not sign agreements with all 9 cities, that will actually free up some one-time dollars for us to consider putting back into the budget at final to help resolve some of those department requests. So this timing is important, and I just wanted to acknowledge why we have a time constriction on this at this time. We also need to complete all the exhibits that are necessary for the agreement. Attached to your agenda item is a template for what we expect the agreement to look like. But there are exhibits that will be very specific to each particular city, and we need a couple of weeks in order to do that. Okay, with that said, I'm going to invite Brian Whitemeyer from the City of Oakdale to come up, and I've asked Brian to be with us this morning to just describe some of the process from the negotiations perspective of how they were able to work in a subcommittee fashion to represent all 9 cities and what some of the conversations were from this city's perspective. All yours.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's great to be with you today. Appreciate the opportunity to take a moment to share with you the efforts that went into finalizing the master property tax agreement that is being presented to you today. Generally, this has been a topic of conversation off and on among the city managers of Stanislaus County and the CEO's office for a number of years. Pre-pandemic, this became a topic of discussion for the mayors of Stanislaus County, who encouraged their city managers to work with the county to try to pursue a new agreement. As I understand it, all the mayors wanted to see the agreement modified, but Mayor Bublak from Turlock and Mayor O'Brien from Riverbank took a larger leadership role in trying to help move the discussions forward. A while back, Mr. Hayes asked the Stanislaus County City Managers Group to select a subcommittee of city managers to represent all of the cities in this effort. The City Managers Group selected the city manager from Riverbank, Newman, Oakdale, and the city of Modesto. Appreciate, I believe my colleagues, Joe Lopez, Michael Holland are here today. They served on that committee. Late last year, when the city manager from Riverbank resigned, the city manager from Patterson stepped into that role. This is an extremely complicated topic, to say the least. And I want to thank Mr. Hayes and Ms. Gill, our county auditor controller, and their teams who worked diligently and tirelessly to provide information that made it easier to comprehend how the current property tax sharing agreement works and how this new model would operate going forward. Numerous meetings between county staff and the city manager subcommittee were held. Formulas were checked and double-checked. The county team provided each city with an abundance of information that facilitated our ability to brief our respective city councils. Efforts were also made by the subcommittee to ensure the other cities knew how the discussions were progressing. Since at least last summer, every month the city managers got together for our normal city managers meeting, and this was a topic of discussion. And that was really important. We wanted to make sure that we had everyone on board. More recently, we held an all-hands meeting of the city managers and city attorneys for the county to discuss the final version of the agreement. Questions were answered and concerns were resolved, and the verbiage of the agreement was finalized. I would like to thank my city manager colleagues, Michael Holland, Regan Wilson, Joe Lopez, Maricela Garcia, Ken Irwin, Mike Pitcock, Mary Mayhew, Alex Terrazas, as well as the former Riverbank City Manager Sean Scully for their efforts on this. Additionally, I would like to thank the city attorneys, Tom Hallinan, Doug White, George Petrolakis, Dan Schroeder, Jose Sanchez, and their associates for all their work to put this together. Especially to Mr. Hayes, thank you for putting up with us as city managers as we consistently hounded you and had these discussions. So appreciate that, and we would strongly encourage that the board pass this item. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.
I think I just have a couple of more slides. Thank you so much, Brian. First is, I just want to read the recommendations, and then I want to provide a little recognition before we're done. First recommendation is to approve the master property tax revenue agreement between Stanislaus County and the county's 9 cities. Second is to authorize the CEO to sign and execute the master property tax revenue agreement with each of our county's 9 cities upon approval of their respective city councils, with this authority expiring at the end of business on July 20th, 2022, for those reasons we previously described. I also want to acknowledge that included in this authorization is the authority for the CEO to make minor edits to the agreement deemed necessary by legal counsel representing the county and/or cities. We've worked on this tirelessly multiple times, and on occasion we'll find a sentence here or there that we think could be worded better to provide more clarity towards the agreement. And I just want to make sure that as this goes forward to city councils, that if somewhere along the way in the next 5 to 6 weeks, ourselves along with our attorneys recognize we could improve it, we would like that authority. And last is to authorize the auditor controller to implement the master property tax revenue agreement upon signing by the respective cities. My final comments here are really just a recognition and a thank you. Brian's comments are correct. This has been a very long process and at times very challenging, one upon which we didn't always necessarily see things exactly in the same lens or come to the same conclusions when we wanted to move forward onto the next step of the process. But I am proud of the work that was done here with all 9 of our cities and the entire teams that came together on the city side as well as the county side to recognize that even when you have differences in your interpretation of data or your best thoughts on what to do as we move forward as a community, we can work through those differences. We can continue to come to a table. We can continue to talk about it. And we can continue to try to be the best listener in the room. And I saw that on both the city side as well as the county side throughout this process. And for me, it was very, very encouraging as a final result. So we're not done. We still have more work to do, even with your approval here today, and which we are seeking. However, we have reached a kind of a milestone agreement where we can move this forward and then take that momentum to continue to work with our cities on other really important issues around economic development and housing. So I look forward to shifting our conversation and continuing our momentum forward. Brian, thank you so much for recognizing all of the city managers who have worked on this, even some of which you aren't with us today. They played very, very important roles, and I want to especially thank the subcommittee that's here with us today. But thank you for naming them all. I had all their names here, but I won't read them all again. I want to thank the county team that worked on this, starting with our County Auditor Controller, Kashmir Gill. She was a strong supporter throughout this entire process, and her right-hand person in this is Nathan Amarant. Nathan has been a tremendous support through this entire process. I also want to thank County Counsel Bose, as well as Sean White from County Counsel's office, and of course our Chief Executive Office team that have worked quite a bit on this, Patrice Dietrich, Tina Rocha, Patrick Kavanaugh, who's with me here with the slide presentation, and joining our team to finish this up is Erica Ignacio as well. If I've missed anybody, I apologize, but I want to thank everybody for your work on this. With that, we'll take any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, We'll open up to the public. Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for more comments, questions. Manny?
Just a quick comment. As has already been mentioned in the presentation by the CEO and the City of Oakdale City Manager Brian Whitemeyer, this is a long time coming. It's exciting. Obviously, it required a lot of communication, understanding, compromise. But as a former Modesto City Council member, I understand some of the challenges that our cities face, and hopefully this agreement leads to better economic vitality for the shared constituency that we all share, which is the residents of Stanislaus County. So it's exciting that this has gotten done, long time coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to express my gratitude to our county staff for all your hard work on this. It's a wonderful job, and hats off to you as well as our city staff and our city partners. And as Supervisor Graywall alluded to, this is a long time coming, and it's just going to build a stronger partnership between our county and our cities, and overall it's going to build a stronger county, being that our cities represent 80% of our population. It's going to make significant impacts for their general funds, whether it's hiring more police officers, more fire services, or cleaning up the parks and park maintenances, as well as Supervisor Graywall, myself. We served on city councils. We have that experience of kind of operating on a dependency of sales tax revenue. So this partnership and this agreement will make huge dividends for our cities and for the county overall. So I do applaud everybody's efforts in this agreement. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chance. Vito?
Thank you very much. This has been a topic of our last 4 retreats. We have a couple a year, a couple of them a year. And I fully admit that I was the most suspect because the information was not out there, what was available when we got into these negotiations. There have been some false starts along the way, and I think it was done right. And I have so much appreciation for the city managers that were, along with Sean Scully, who is no longer with us, just the methodology we used this time to figure out what really is going on in the county. Not using a reserve level or something else to say that there's too much money here, there's too much money there. This was a deep dive about providing services and what's sustainable for each. To Kashmir and your team and the county leadership team, the volume of information that we received is truly amazing. And now I've heard from Patrice that we've got this great roadmap so we can update this on a more regular basis rather than every 26 years. The bottom line is what the CEO talked about, is that in Stanislaus County we have a smaller pie. So we're going to reallocate a smaller pie. And I'm going to challenge all the employees of all the cities in the county, as well as ourselves, as well as the city managers, to try and change the pie, the size of the pie. Patrice and I did some quick work this morning. Merced is at 22%, we're at 12%, and San Joaquin's at 18%. That's $50 to $120 million more that would come into this county to be spent on services within the city and the county if we were at San Joaquin or Merced County. We're not. That's based on AB8 and a snapshot in time. There's no reason it's not fair to the people of Stanislaus County for us to continue to just move a smaller pie around, because long-term it has implications. I also want to make sure that we don't wait 26 years. We have this conversation again, maybe every decade, because it's not today. I went back and tried to read what was happening in 1996 when the agreement came around, because there's folklore everywhere about how that came about. But the bottom line is there's not a lot of money to be traded in the first year. You fast forward 26 years, and there's a lot of money to be traded because it's essentially compounding interest. So we should have these discussions more often, and not less often. I think the process, there's a great established process now. And again, hats off to the city managers, to Jody and your team. It's just a lot of really good work that's been done. And I feel comfortable, and I know, as I said, I was the most suspect coming into this. I have been the most suspect because we have an obligation to provide services to the public too that are mandated. A lot of them are mandated. But this seems to be a solid agreement that will help all sides.
Thanks, Vito. Buck?
Yeah, that, I can't say any more that the supervisors here have already spoke about. I'd just like to really congratulate and say thank you to the CEO's office and the entire county team, even the city's team, but more importantly, the county team, because one, I'm not an accountant, two, we're a property tax specialist, and you really had to break out the colored pencils with me and get me through this subject. But finding a way to keep local tax dollars here and where it works for both the county and the cities. So I just, I'm going to support this wholeheartedly, and I just congratulate all the teams in getting us here.
Very good. Thanks, Buck. Just to wind up what everybody said here, this is, ever since I've been on the board, I'm sure ever since Vito, and we didn't come from a city background as Manny and Chance, but talk about the folklore, the urban legend, it was always, the first thing we would hear was the inequities that were out there as far as the cost sharing, the tax sharing arrangement agreement between the counties and the cities, and then that would just get worse as there was turnover on city councils, and there hasn't been as much turnover here on our boards, but every new city council from the cities would come with the same concerns, and then we'd go back to our old argument was, well, look at all the services the county has to provide, and I think we even at one point had a chart as far as our cost per person, I think, in the county, what the county has to incur to service those peoples, and it's in all these things that we talk about, but it would go back to, well, we provide the district attorney, the public offender, the mental health department, the health service agency. We just go through all these things that the county has to provide, as Vito says, many of them mandated, and as far as what our costs were, we're still talking about a very small percentage of the pie that we have to provide all those services with. So there was just this constant back and forth, and nothing ever really seemed to get resolved. But I just can't thank you guys enough for sitting down and figuring out these numbers. And that's what was so great about this. And from an accountant standpoint, the numbers don't lie, right? And so we were able to, or you guys were able to sit down with the cities and the city managers and just let's put it all on the table and see exactly what we're dealing with, where we came from, where we're going to go from here, and what this all means, rather than just these vague conversations that we've been having for years. We put it all out there on the table and discussed what everything means, and that was with the work of our auditor controller and Jody and his team to do this. And then it made the conversation, I think, much easier at that point, because it wasn't the urban legends, the folklore. It was, these are the numbers we're talking about. How do we make this more fair for everybody? So I can't thank you guys enough for doing that and putting the time in to make this happen. As Vito says, let's not do it every 26 years. But it was a long time coming, a lot of hard work to get there, and a lot of negotiations, and I appreciate everybody being at the table and being a part of this as far as the cities and sitting down and working through this. So I'm very proud of the work all of you have done to get us to this point. So thank you guys. And if no other comments, we will look for a motion.
Motion to approve the item.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you guys very much. Thank you everyone involved. Okay, we're going to move on to item 7.1, and I think Jody's going to make a statement here really quick before we get started.
Thank you very much. And so we're going to move on to present our 2022-2023 proposed budget. And as our team comes to the podium here to get us set up, I know Supervisor Graywall would like to make a statement in advance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. I'm deeply regretful that I'm going to have to miss this item. My dad's elder brother, a patriarch for our family, passed away last week, so I have to attend to his funeral. But this budget, just like we've said in previous budget recommendations or budget meetings, we have been thoroughly briefed on all of these budget items. Input has been provided. I've provided input of which has been implemented in this budget, and I'm excited. I think this budget is going to do a lot for the residents of Stanislaus County, and the finances and the financial sustainability the county has shown is further displayed in this budget. But so although I won't get to vote on this budget, and I know my colleagues will be listening for all the departments, I've heard all of the briefings, and I wholeheartedly support all of the contents of this budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny. All right.
And before I get started, I just want to recognize and thank you for those kind words. Supervisor Graywall, our condolences are with you and your family, and we wish you all the best today. Thank you. Okay. I think we're ready now to go ahead and get started. So, good morning. Coming up on afternoon, I'm happy to introduce the team that will be presenting our 2022-23 proposed budget to you this morning. Representing the CEO budget team at the staff table are Jewel War, Deputy Executive Officer, and Joshua Woolworth, our Senior Management Consultant. Welcome to the team up here. Probably your first presentation up here, Joshua, so welcome. Patrice Dietrich is also here with us, Assistant Executive Officer, and Patrick Kavanaugh will be presenting, as well as customary. We've invited some of our department heads to join us here this morning as well. I'm pleased to see that we have many department heads in our audience with their respective teams as well. And I want to thank them all in advance for all of your hard work that came to put this document together. It's a much different document than we've used in the past, but equal, if not more, hard work has gone into prepare this year's proposed budget. So in summary, I want to acknowledge that our departments, from our perspective, are well supported in this recommended budget, both at the base level as well as with new funding requests. We have not approved everything that we've been asked for, but we have done an awful lot to support our county infrastructure in this budget. We prioritize the sheriff's budget in recognition of this board's priority for a safe community and a strong, safe neighborhoods. This budget does rely upon $23 million in general fund balance above discretionary revenue. So we are dipping into our savings account as we traditionally do at the beginning of fiscal year. And we did defer some of those one-time requests for final budget consideration when we actually know what our year-end results will be. That said, we do have many indicators that our year-end performance will be positive this year, and I'll be sharing thoughts on what to do with investment recommendations later in this presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Patrice and team and go ahead and get started.
Patrice,
Okay.
good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. As Jody said, condolences to Supervisor Graywall and his family. And since this is the budget presentation requiring 4/5 vote, I'm counting on the rest of you to hang with us through the rest of this presentation. I know you all know. Okay, so on screen we have the perfect introduction to the proposed budget. Joel found this quote, and it resonated beautifully with us. A vision without a strategy remains an illusion. So it speaks to the importance of clear leadership vision and the strategic plan emphasized as essential to achieving actual results. And this board, as you know, has been engaged with us and the department heads since December in the biennial performance visioning process. The county's vision and mission are clear and are providing the foundation for us to build the budget upon. Budget not driving that vision, right, but the budget carrying forward what that vision and mission is. We build community, becoming a community of choice where people live, work, and thrive, a place worthy of calling home. And you'll see that commitment to this vision in the recommendations before you this morning. So I'm going to kick off by summarizing financial data that supports the proposed budget, and our team will provide highlights of the recommended investments within each of your board priority areas. We have several department heads joining us this morning. We're delighted to have them, as well as their department leadership team, their budget managers, and the rest of our CEO budget team. Not joining me at the podium today is Angelica Ramos. She and I tag team on discretionary revenue and fund balance, and I'm grateful for her support in this budget process as well. Grateful to all of the folks that I've mentioned. It takes our full team throughout the county to pull this budget together. And as always, I'm as well grateful for your leadership. As I've mentioned before, a strong vision is what motivates me, right? Supervisor Withrow, we can build all kinds of financial plans behind strong vision, and so we think we have that for you today. So right into the numbers. On screen is a table that identifies and compares the proposed budget both at base level in the second column to the proposed recommended budget on the far right, and we're comparing all the way back to the adopted final budget 21-22 in the first set of columns on the left. The base budget of $1.5 billion represents the resource commitment to sustain current county operations at current service levels. So that means existing positions, inclusive of standard cost of doing business increases that represent a 1% increase over the adopted final budget of the prior year. So again, that base budget is what you see, current authorized staff levels, current program service levels. It actually removes one-time funding for one-time projects, but it does allow for a standard cost of doing business. The proposed budget represents an increase of 4.1% over that base, with $61 million in recommended adjustments before you this morning. That includes $8.9 million in technical carry forward of appropriations into the next budget year. The 22-23 recommended proposed budget totals $1.57 billion. It's funded by $1.18 billion in estimated revenue, relying on the use of $77 million in fund balance and retained earnings across the organization, and $307.6 million in general fund contribution, also called net county cost. This represents a 5.1% increase in appropriations over that included in the prior fiscal year. Discretionary revenue represents funds that are available for programs at your board's discretion, the majority of which is used to support public safety, government-related services, and to meet mandated match requirements that leverage federal and state-funded programs. The 22-23 recommended proposed budget includes discretionary revenue estimated at $278.4 million. You can see that on the far right hand of the screen. This is an increase of 1.9% from the 21-22 year-end projections. This funding level will serve as a placeholder pending updates that we'll provide at final budget when we have the year-end close and can see the total actual growth in both the prior year, as well as have the exciting announcement from the assessor on the value of the assessment roll. So we have an estimate in here, and we've done our projections accordingly, and we just wait with excitement for that number. I do also want to say that following the last presentation on tax sharing, we have factored the $1.4 million contribution or reduction actually in our anticipated revenues in order to support the 9 cities moving forward, we hope, with their agreements as well. So that is also included in that number. The chart on the screen identifies actual discretionary revenue from 13-14 through 2021. We'll point out that 2021 appears to have a little bit of a dip there. That is the result of a one-time prior year post-close adjustment to revenue. The trend line is what's important, and you can see that growth. It is about a 5.5% year-over-year growth in each of these years. I'm going to move on to the next slide. This chart is showing total budget appropriations for all funds in the county for comparison from 16-17 forward. The annual increase through 21-22 averaged about 5.7%. You can see the proposed budget increasing 5.1% from the previous year. And again, I do want to point out that in 2021, there are additional appropriation levels there which were in part addressing the pandemic, which inflated our budget. We did bring in additional revenues that year. The budget is above the cost traditionally anticipated. And if we remove for that anomaly, then our average annual increases have been about 5%. Similar to what we see in this proposed budget before you. This chart shows the budget appropriations in the general fund specifically. Again, the historical budgeted appropriations showing a comparable steady increase in costs about 6.7% through 21-22. The 22-23 proposed budget has increased by 11.2% from the prior year, and this is in part due to our response to department request for increased service levels above base. It also includes, and this is unusual for us, I want to point it out, about $6.1 million in reappropriation of a net county cost supporting multi-year projects and carry forward into 22-23. We might also refer to these as rollover projects. These have traditionally been accommodated only in the legal budget process through technical adjustments completed by our auditor controller. This year, we've had to make a change in our practice in order to support our cloud migration. So while we've been working on the budget and other important financial analyses with the auditor's office. That team is also leading multiple county departments and in partnership with ITC in migrating our financial system and our new budget system into the cloud. So we're moving to Oracle Cloud October 1. And as part of that, we're trying to make a clean break between the accounting period that ends June 30 of this year and a clean break in our budget as well starting on July 1. So this rollover process incorporated in proposed budget will accomplish that. And as well, you'll see us attempting to not adjust the budget between July and September in order that when we do that one upload for October 1, that we have that clean budget and can readily balance all of the important actuals, for example, cash and other charges in our books. So lots going on in finance land right now. And then here we have a cool visual to depict what is our long-range model. We do annual budget analysis with attention to this multi-year general fund long-range model. It does provide guidance for financial decisions. And as I'm looking at it this morning, Supervisor Keyes has said to me recently, when I look back, what it's forecasting is never real. And that is true. And what he also kindly said to me was, it's the projections that allow us to respond well in advance so that when we get to that future, we're lining up our revenues, which are depicted in the white line, with the costs, which are predicted and projected in the green line on the chart before you. So we've done this model through budget year 27-28. Our overall forecast does reflect an annual average growth at about 3%. Our general fund costs are also projected at 3% annually beginning in budget year 23-24 through 27-28. And we will be relying on one-time reserves or adjustments or other revenue solutions in order to balance the budget in future years. And it's that forecasting and planning that will make us be prepared and will line us up to be balanced. I do also want to note, in case departments who are listening and are aware that recent cost of doing business in CPI has in fact been greater than 3%, that the 3% that's in the model is the base, right, that we work from. And when we come back at final budget, we'll look at that, we'll adjust the spending plan as we go forward. There have been some anomalies in cost of doing business in CPI that appear to be still post-COVID and our economy right-sizing. And we'll continue to monitor that and work together. As you can see on the screen, the two prior years that are identified on the left show that our actual revenues came in excess of our actual cost. Again, the revenue is in white, the resources, and the costs are in green. The current year and 22-23 proposed budget show equal funding and expenditures because we've balanced our budget as we want to and also as required by law. And then the years in the future show, again, that potential projected gap that we'll be working towards narrowing and resolving funding solutions for. Okay, and now we're going to jump into the fun part of the presentation, which is where we're going to speak to your board priorities. Our budget continues to be organized by those priorities identified on the screen, and with the nice icons demonstrating each one of them. If we skip right on to the next slide, here we have a donut chart that demonstrates the recommended proposed budget at $1.6 billion by your board priority area. So you can see we go clockwise around this chart, and on the far right, the departments supporting community health make up the largest portion of the budget at 41.8%. You'll recall many of those departments and programs are mandated and do have federal and state funds that come to assist in financing that priority area. The departments supporting strong and safe neighborhoods make up 21.8% of the budget and are there towards the bottom. Followed closely by departments delivering efficient public services at 20.2% of the budget. Delivering community infrastructure comes in at 13.7%. And then departments developing a healthy economy and promoting first-rate learning make up the remaining priorities at 1.6% and 0.9% respectively. So we're going to talk now in a little more detail through each of the priority areas, and we'll start with supporting community health. So the 22-23 recommended proposed budget for supporting community health totals $654.9 million. This is an increase of $13.6 million over the base budget. Recommended budget adjustments are supported by $12.9 million in estimated revenue, the use of just under $7,000 of fund balance and retained earnings, and $631,802 in net county cost. And while there are staffing adjustments impacting the allocation count at the department level, there's no net impact when we combine the priority together. So a couple quick highlights here. For aging and veterans services, we have additional funding to support purchase of new replacement vehicles, existing and expanded service needs there, along with a new position to support program growth. Behavioral health and recovery services is continuing to right-size and adjust to evolving needs and changes in both funding opportunities as well as community need. They're adjusting positions and base budget to incorporate that available funding sources and aligned with their strategic plan, which also does seek to really focus services to the community. Child support services is also aligning positions within their available funding and department needs. They're changing the classification title of their line staff worker from child support officer to child support specialist. This better aligns with the role of the position. It promotes a positive image within the community and is also in line with the title that is used in more than 75% of our comparable counties. The Community Services Agency will expand foster care services using some additional available funding made available through the 4E, which is federal funding. Cover the annual maintenance of effort in support of the in-home supportive services program, and also be purchasing and implementing a kiosk for the Access Center lobby to record critical data for client customers being served. And for Health Services Agency post-pandemic, this department has revisited and re-energized its strategic vision and is addressing organizational needs by a restructure of their management level. And there's some deletion, addition, and reclassification of positions to accommodate that. The details are in the staffing impacts attachment to the agenda item. And at this point, it's my pleasure to welcome Ruben Imperial, our Director of Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. He'll come to the podium to highlight some of the exciting information about behavioral health and recovery services.
Ruben, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Withrow, Board of Supervisors, CEO Hayes, County Council Bose. I'm Ruben Imperial. I'm the Director for Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. And I want to remind you of our mission is that our priority is to provide and manage effective prevention and behavioral health services that promote the community's capacity to achieve wellness, resiliency, and recovery outcomes. How do we turn it? Do I turn it? Oh, perfect. All right. So I am going to highlight some of the recent investments in mental health that our department is working towards. And as our update reports that based on the governor's budget, there are projected increases both in realignment and Mental Health Services Act funds, which is the department's main funding streams that are used to leverage the federal Medi-Cal program. The historic part of the state budget is investments in housing for individuals with severe mental illness, and a variety of one-time investments in providing resources for county departments to implement a variety of reforms, primarily CalAIM, the Medi-Cal reform and transformation effort at the state level, which is an effort to increase access, especially for individuals that are homeless and with a mental health or a substance use disorder issue, as well as various other reforms that will allow us to bill for services that we don't bill for right now. And so lots of work that needs to happen over the next year. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how those investments and those increases in realignment and the Mental Health Services Act, in addition to these administrative infrastructure type funds, how we're beginning to use those locally. These additional revenues on the treatment side will be allocated in alignment with our department's strategic plan. If you remember, our strategic plan really focused on treatment team structure, and what we are doing, we are expanding some of those services, and I'll go over those. The areas of investment are access to services, treatment expansions in mental health and substance use disorder, and adding infrastructure to continue to take full advantage of recent state investments in behavioral health treatment and housing. Additionally, I think it's important to note that the department's strategy also includes a very proactive strategy in regards to the Mental Health Services Act funds in this fiscal year. The county mental health across the state, this particular areas of funds are often noticed for the amount of savings or amount of those funds that are kept in the bank. Our department has chosen a strategy to be very proactive in how we program those dollars and monitor closely the actual allocation and then the expenditures, and then to adjust services as we need to moving forward. So you'll notice in our budget that that's something that we are doing in light of our strategy and our strategic plan. We feel that we have a structure that allows us to scale up and down as needed. So for access, what we're doing is we're expanding assessment capabilities. We're adding clinicians primarily to our contract programs to increase the number of slots. When someone calls our access line and wants to get an assessment on the mental health side, we're expanding the number of those clinicians on our treatment teams. And that's going to create more assessment opportunities and lower the wait time. We're also investing in our crisis and support line, making this run optimally over a 24/7 hour period. You had remembered in our strategic plan, the stakeholder input that we got, one of the highlights, one of the most that came back to us was how complicated at times it is to get help. And what we've been doing over the last year as we implemented our strategic plan is restructure our crisis and access line. That's the 558-4600 number. So we did an initial phase. We are taking advantage of these recent investments, especially in MHSA, to add capability, to add more capability to be more responsive and as responsive as we can. So that's what we're doing in terms of access. In terms of treatment, we are also, or in terms of access, we're actually adding a promotional campaign, which we're excited about. We're adding resources for social media and other broad marketing strategies. Messages will focus on how to access treatment services across the spectrum of care. We're working with education and our managed care programs to ensure that we're not just promoting county mental health services, but we're promoting additional partner services as well. And primarily driven by many of our partnerships with law enforcement, we are expanding mobile crisis response, and the board has already considered and approved various board agenda items over the last few months, but we're bringing additional recommendations in this budget to continue to expand mobile crisis response teams for the Modesto Police Department, and we are working on some strategies with the Sheriff's Office as well. And then last, treatment. You may remember that part of our strategic plan, our systems of care were organized around treatment teams. You have county treatment teams, Telecare has a treatment team, Turning Point has a treatment team on the adult side, and we have several on the children's side. Basically what we're doing is we're expanding treatment teams, one in the adult system of care, one in the children's system of care, and one for our transitional age youth. Basically that's going to increase caseload capacity as well as reduce caseload sizes. So we're creating some capacity here in the event that we start to see, we are beginning to see, at least on the adult side and some of the children's side, increased demand for services. So we're adding capacity to absorb any of that increase. If it doesn't materialize, what happens is we lower caseloads. And as we shared in our strategic plan, that's the core of how we're expanding and considering any new money, any new services. It's real clear about how we are building out our services and providing these and using these additional resources. It's very important for you to for me to continue to state, though, that staffing will continue to be a substantive challenge in any of the services that we continue to expand and provide, not only for the county, but for our contract partners as well. The vacancy rates of our contractors have equal impact, whether it's not a county or a contract program. in light of the total system of care. And go on to the next slide. And as far as administrative infrastructure, our recommendations are focused on continuing to take full advantage of recent state funding opportunities and new reforms around Medi-Cal, and to strengthen and expand treatment services for our community. Our goal is, despite the staffing challenges and a lot of the challenges that come with trying to secure additional resources, we feel it's important. That we are trying to secure as much resources for our community as possible. And so we'll continue to be thoughtful about how we do that, but this is a time in the state of California where there is substantive investments in mental health, and a lot of that also involves whether, not just when we apply for funding and get grants, but our partner agencies like education and managed care also are receiving these types of funds, and there's a lot of administrative work and infrastructure work that needs to go into coordinating that care. So it's where you have seen some of the recent state investments is in that type of support for counties. And in addition to the work of, for instance, like CalAIM, we are also embarking on a very substantive effort that usually only happens probably once several years or a decade. We're going to be implementing a new electronic health record. And this is an initial investment in that project. We are joining 20 plus other counties in the state of California to implement a joint electronic health record so that we can take advantage of economies of scale and around areas of training and technical capability, and also negotiating with DHCS on a variety of what is it that we need to be documenting in our electronic health record. In addition to those statewide efforts, we also have our county planning process underway with the Oracle Enterprise Resource Planning and Enterprise Performance Management Project. So in addition to those very broad historic statewide efforts, we are also working internally countywide on those projects as well as other departments. So with that, that's my report. Am I supposed to stay here and ask questions?
Well, let's see if we got any questions for Ruben. Anybody? Just real quick, Ruben, a couple quick things. As far as the vacancies and the shortages, we know staff, clinicians, all that stuff. I know we always talk about this, Stan State talking about trying to, is there any new movement on that? Anything going on there as far as expanding their programs?
Yeah, it was included, the most recent proposal that we've been working with the two other counties and Stan State was included in the budget. So there's two parts to that. One was Senator Eggman proposed it as a special allocation to the three counties, so that went forward, and there's nothing right now saying that it's not going to not be approved, so that's good news. As far as the state, they also have made an allocation, I think it's a few $100 million, and expanding social work programs at CSUs and UCs throughout the state. So it did make it into the governor's budget, and he's actually put it there and made some special comments around Central Valley in terms of those allocation of resources. So those are the two things that we feel we've been able to help move forward recently.
Perfect. So hopefully there's some help coming here. It looks like there's hope.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then just the electronic health records. We have electronic health records. This is just a new, sounds like a kind of more of a regional approach, using a system that everybody else is using. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a current electronic health record, and it's very old and very outdated, and probably the company the software company that developed it actually stopped supporting it a year ago, and we're on borrowed time. So we need one right away.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
The 2022-2023 recommended proposed budget for supporting strong and safe neighborhoods totals $340.8 million, an increase of $26.3 million over base budget. Recommended budget adjustments over base are supported by $9.4 million in estimated revenue, the use of $1.3 million in the use of fund balance and retained earnings, and $15.5 million in net county cost. In total, staffing adjustments account for the addition of 30 positions for this priority. Provisions within the proposed budget will allow the district attorney to replace an aging vehicle, cover legal services to assist with post-conviction work, and set ongoing net county cost support for the real estate fraud budget unit. Probation will replace multiple vehicles and needed equipment based on replacement guidelines and align and reclassify positions to align with departmental needs. One position tied to a funded agreement that will not be renewed will be deleted. The public defender will repurpose funding to embed IT support, deleting hard-to-fill positions, and add positions to increase rehabilitative success for justice-involved adults, resulting in no net change to the position allocation. Additionally, the department will purchase a new vehicle for the alternate defender's office to maintain the glass wall separation between the two offices. The standard replacement of vehicles and IT equipment are included in the Sheriff's Department budget, along with provisions to initiate Phase 3 of adult detention expansion, support various infrastructure projects, and expand or enhance a variety of programs and services to the community. Several staffing adjustments result in the addition of 33 new positions to support various divisions, services, and programs within the department, and the deletion of 2 grant-funded positions for a net increase to the department allocation of 31 positions. These include 4 positions in administration to provide oversight, improve automation, and address increased workloads. 1 position will provide school resource officer functions for Riverbank Unified School District and law enforcement services for the City of Riverbank. 1 position to implement a new community preparedness program, 11 positions in detention to provide additional supervision and support inmate programs, 16 positions in operations to investigate complex digital media crimes and support the Real-Time Crime Center Fusion Center Community Resources Investigation Unit, Salida Substation, Special Vehicles Off-Road Unit, and Patrol Division. The deletion of 2 vacant positions is due to the discontinuation of grant funding. At this time, I would like to welcome Sheriff Dirksey to the podium to highlight the Sheriff's Department.
Jeff, it's still good morning.
I will be done by noon. How's that? Now, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Hayes, Mr. Bose. Thanks for having me up here briefly to talk about where we're going with this budget at the Sheriff's Office. First, I want to thank the CEO's team and Patrice and your team for getting this done. I do realize that we require a lot of work, and we thank them for their efforts. So with that, as we just talked about staffing, staffing is the single biggest metric that I look at as the sheriff and what it is that we can do for the public, and that is reflective of what you see in this proposed budget in front of you. In short, the more people we have, the more we can do for our community in keeping it safe, and the more efficiently or quickly that we can do that as well. So 3 brief categories to discuss. First is our operations, our men and women out in the field, patrol, detectives, and so on. And you have a few different aspects of it in this budget. One is leadership, as we talked about. There will be both an increase in direct supervision, but also that administrative level and management, specifically with coordinating a lot of our community engagement programs. The new lieutenant position is going to focus on that, and I think that we're going to see an even greater impact with engaging our community. Second, we will increase our off-road unit, specifically our river patrols. This is something that has come up over time in the last few years. Between our different rivers, there's some different criteria, but to put a team out on the rivers to keep them safe and clean in a great spot where we can recreate. And then the final piece is the investigations component for our operations division, and it is an additional sergeant and 5 detectives that can focus solely or specifically on fentanyl and crimes of violence. I just looked up some HIDA stats. HIDA is the high-intensity drug trafficking area of which we are part. Since 2019, there has been a 322% increase in fentanyl seizures and deaths over, in the HIDA, which is kind of the Central Valley of California. We have to have more folks that can focus on that specifically. In our adult detention in our jails, the staffing focus is on inmate safety and inmate programs. We have a variety of things in the program side specifically that we're very excited about. We are entering into a partnership with one of our local unions, the Electrical Workers Union, where we are going to actually, they are going to hire 12 inmates to work on a large project, and they will get paid actually slightly above minimum wage and we will transport them out there. And there's a lot of criteria behind this, but it is so that they can basically start a job while they are actually in our custody, that they can keep as a union member, as a trade worker, once they are released from custody. We also have a lot of our ag programs that we are greatly expanding. We have our eggs, which I don't think officially have named, but we call them jailbird eggs. And but we have chickens that raise eggs. But all of this is in an effort to reduce recidivism amongst our inmate population. And finally, as the Sheriff's Office grows, it is also incumbent upon us to support or to increase our support staff to support all of the deputies, the men and women out in the field. We have to have the IT, the clerical, the finance staff to keep us operating. And the one I really want to highlight here is our crime analysts. They do a variety of things for us, from assisting detectives or patrol and in keeping, or in their investigations and finding some of the folks that we need to find. But as we talk about things like these active shooters that we see with greater prevalence across our country, a lot of our analysts are the ones that are ultimately going to be the ones that proactively find them on social media and draw them to someone's attention. So the expansion of that program is absolutely critical to keeping our community safe. So I want to thank you for your support on this, assuming all 4 of you vote yes. And again, thank the CEO's office for their efforts, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Vito?
Just one on the school resource officers. How does that work? School reimbursed for all 12 months or just the 8 months of school? And
I don't know off the top of my head what the Riverbank contract is. I don't know if it's 50-50 or 80-20. I know the 3 that we have with SCOE is 80-20, where the SCOE pays 80% of those and we pick up 20%. We use them kind of how we need to in the summer. Riverbank, I believe, is the same, but I'm not sure.
Brooke has already shook her head that it's 80-20.
Okay,
so
good.
I can see that from the back.
Excellent. Thank you, Brooke. Yes.
We're going to call her Geppetto.
Yes.
We're gonna be Pinocchio. Okay, thank you.
Sheriff, assuming the budget does pass, how quick can we get deputies out on the rivers? I know you receive the same phone calls I do when it comes to summertime on our rivers.
Honestly, it will probably be next summer before they are. We have to build the deputies behind them. We actually know who they'll be already, most likely, but we have to build the deputies behind them to replace them to go out there. So functionally, it'll be next summer.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit sooner.
Maybe I can talk you into putting some deputies out there on a short time.
We can have that conversation.
Thanks, Buck. Yeah, and Jeff, I just want to, again, Salida, boy, just what a difference that's made out there in that neighborhood and in the town of Salida. Just, like I said, they have their own little Mayberry out there now, I think.
Yep, very much.
Just doing great stuff out there, so I thank you for that.
And on that note, too, I just went up and looked at the substation remodel that's going on at Fire Station 12 right now. I was up there yesterday, and it is moving along very rapidly. So that will be fully operational, I think, by the end of this month.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Patrick, how are you?
Good, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The 2022-2023 recommended proposed budget for developing a healthy economy totals $24.9 million, an increase of $157,402 over base budget. Recommended budget adjustments over base are supported by $49,400 in estimated revenue and $108,002 in net county cost. And total staffing adjustments account for the addition of 2 positions for this priority. Provisions in the Agricultural Commissioner's proposed budget will fund the replacement of 1 vehicle and the restoration of staffing to pre-reduction in force levels impacted during fiscal year 2008-2009, replacing the part-time extra help support provided in the interim with 1 new full-time position. Similarly, University of California Cooperative Extension will restore staffing to pre-reduction in force levels to provide critical administrative support, adding 1 position to their allocation. It is now my pleasure to welcome Kamal Bagri, the Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures, to the podium to highlight the Ag Commissioner's office.
Kamal, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Chair Vito. Yeah, it is officially good afternoon. Members of the board, CEO Hayes and County Council Bose, Kamal Bagri, Agriculture Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures. I have the longest title, County Council. Continue to remind me of that. I'm here this afternoon to highlight and share with you some of the successful projects our department is working on and some of the challenges we are facing along the way. As you can see, our mission is to support and protect the well-being of agriculture, businesses, and our community. So in line with the support to the agriculture, one of the basic program Agriculture Commissioner has is to trap for the pest of economic importance, such as medfly, glasswing sharpshooter, other fruit flies, which are detrimental to our agriculture. So this CalTrap program, it is a electronic program, and we started 6 years ago with the state in development of this program, but I'm delighted to say that this year we have implemented this electronic program and have put out 4,338 traps now using the routes on iPad rather than using the books. So conventionally, these trap records were kept by hand on cards for each trapping location with hand-drawn maps and keys of parcels that host traps were put out. We relied on the trappers to learn their assigned areas and scout for locations to figure out the best sites or the hosts, which are the trees, fruit trees, and the timing to use them. CalTrap has advantages that in one screen you can look and see exactly where the traps are hung across an area. You can see if they have been serviced on schedule. You can see other valid properties and hosts, as well as follow yourself on the map as you navigate around. As data is converted into CalTrap, our trappers, who are seasonal staff, they can query to find a specific type of host and see its location without physically driving through an area to find one. Trap record cards and map will no longer be hand recorded. In CalTrap, it is a matter of just a few clicks. Our supervising office staff can log in and see where our traps are located across the county without having to wait for the trapper to return to the office with their map binders. In the event of having a trapper out for an extended time period, which we are also having the staff challenges to hire our part-time staff, we can assign a backup person and they immediately will see what needs to be done on a route. Trappers will be going from 5 4-inch binders to just one iPad to keep these records. So this is huge for us. And why is it important? CalTrap will streamline and modernize our pest detection record keeping and trap servicing. This program will increase our staff efficiency and provide accurate data immediately in case any pest of economic importance is found. As you are probably well aware, whenever we find these A-rated pests, right away we have to go into deployment of hundreds of traps within the square miles, 1 square mile area, and also going out to even 5-mile area. And it's important to have all that record immediately available to be provided to the state for delimitation purposes. The second thing we are working on is in our regulatory pesticide use enforcement program. The department was presented with an opportunity late last year to participate and help with shaping new regulations which are going to take effect in January of 2024. So in voluntary partnership with the Department of Pesticide Regulation, the Ag Commissioner's Office took on a pilot pesticide notification project. One thing to keep in mind is out of the 58 counties in the state of California, only 4 counties have this pilot project. This project will help inform in the development of a statewide notification system Department of Pesticide Regulation is developing. This statewide system is being designed to help provide transparent and equitable access to provide information to our residents regarding pesticide applications near where people live, work, and play, so that the public has the opportunity to know and make their own decisions and take additional personal precautions. The Stanislaus County notification system pilot started on April 1st, so we launched it on April 1st and is providing notification to the community of Grayson. So at this point, we are only starting with one town, and that's Grayson. We met with the grower community, Farm Bureau, and the community members of the Grayson earlier this year. The program has been working well for the last 2 months and has provided several notifications to our community members, and we have received positive comments from our Grayson community members on that. Our participation in this pilot is vital, as it will help provide our agriculture industry with an opportunity to be at the table, provide input for shaping these new statewide regulations. So along the way, we have challenges. The department has been facing with the fair share of challenges, from staffing, recruitment. I have currently a couple of positions open, along with my assistant position, which was open 2 weeks ago and received 0 applications, so we had to extend it. So we have been facing challenges specifically in certain programs, and I would like to share those with you. In the ag-urban interface, pesticide program, which is an enforcement program, we are receiving more and more pesticide-related complaints and investigation. During COVID-19, we all saw that more and more people are moving from big cities into the agriculture areas of our county. On average, the department received 75 investigations per year related with pesticides. But that number is now close to 120 in past 2 years. The projected workload increase just for this year is estimated at 20%. With more people moving into agriculture areas and a continuous slew of new regulations, we are definitely seeing a big impact not only on our department, but also on our agricultural businesses. This year, we have been working with the CEO's office to study adding a new classification for an Inspector 4 position. This new position will help the program manager with day-to-day staff direction and review and process any pending investigations. Currently, for last 4 months, we have over 50 investigations which are open in pesticide program. I would like to thank the board members for approving this study in the last year's budget. We are anticipating that this study will be completed by the final budget time frame, and the department will be requesting to add a position for the Inspector 4. The other challenge we are having is in our weights and measures program. So we are receiving, along with the pesticide-related complaints, we are also seeing a huge increase in the device-related complaints, mainly for the gas pumps. With the average price of gas nearing $6, the member of the public tend to call our office more frequently to double-check the accuracies of those gas pumps and those devices. The department currently has 4 weights and measures inspector who on annual basis test and seal over 8,500 devices. And out of those 8,500, 5,459 are for the retail motor fuel devices. That means for the gas pumps. With every complaint, staff is required to go back and retest those devices. The staff responded to 51 complaints last year related with these devices, and this year, as of May 31st, we already had 23 complaints. In the proposed budget, the department is requesting to add a full-time administrative clerk position to deal with the increased volume of phone calls, and I appreciate our CEO's recommendation and the board's consideration for approval for this position. In the end, I would like to thank all my staff for their continued work in protecting our $3.6 billion agriculture industry. We'll maintain our efforts of supporting our agricultural and business industry while protecting the public and the customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamal. Any questions for Kamal?
I just remind everyone, it's a $3.5 billion farm gate value with, it's about $10 billion with multiplier, and we're adding 2 positions, one in cooperative extension and one in the Ag Commissioner's office. So it's an important industry, and when you need something, I'm telling the two ag departments, you need to ask for it, because everyone thinks like a farmer, and farmers don't, they try and keep money in the bank, and because you never know how next year's going to be. But just my thought. I'm channeling my inner Jim DeMartini.
There you go. Good job. Thanks, Vito. Yeah, on those, you said there were 51 complaints about the pumps. Any of them turn out to be worth anything?
Actually, most of the time, we do not find any issues with the devices. Usually, pumps are giving more. That's the records are showing that. But again, people tend to look at the gauge of their, gas meter, and they tend to say that we are paying more and we are not getting enough. So even though these devices are already sealed, we tend to go back just to double check the accuracy, which takes time and effort. So.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Kamal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who's going to channel me when I'm gone?
The 22-23 recommended proposed budget for promoting first-rate learning totals $14.8 million, an increase of about $543,000 over base budget. Recommended budget adjustments over base are supported by $800,000 in estimated revenue and $375,000 in net county cost, resulting in $632,081 in savings to fund balance. There are no staffing adjustments for this priority. The library will utilize additional extra help staff to support department operations, replace aging vehicles, and fund a consultant to develop a strategic plan aligning budget with additional anticipated revenue. To provide long-term financial stability for library operations and decrease reliance on fund balance, the proposed budget includes the restoration of annual general fund support to the fiscal year 2008-2009 level. The 22-23 recommended proposed budget for delivering community infrastructure totals $214.7 million, an increase of $4.8 million over base budget. The recommended budget adjustments over base are supported by $902,380 in estimated revenue, the use of $2.1 million in fund balance and retained earnings, and $1.8 million in net county cost. There are no staffing adjustments to account for in this priority. Environmental resources will replace aged IT servers and computer equipment, address blight in unincorporated areas, replace equipment to ensure compliance with the San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District, and right-size groundwater program revenue. The proposed budget will fund renovation projects, the development of a deferred maintenance plan, replace aging vehicles, and support timely repairs, maintenance, and equipment replacements for parks and recreation. The provisions in the budget will allow planning and community development to fund computers and equipment for staff, provide for part-time extra help clerical support, address critical cleanup of dangerous buildings and properties, and support the sixth cycle housing update. And finally, the results of an extensive reclassification study support the establishment of 7 new classifications in the engineering and survey series within Public Works, resulting in the reclassification of 16 positions. And now Jewel will speak to our final priority and wrap up today's presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. The 2022-2023 proposed budget for delivering efficient public services totals $316.1 million, an increase of $15.7 million over base budget. Recommended budget adjustments over base are supported by $2.5 million in estimated revenue, the use of $1.2 million in fund balance and retained earnings, and $11.9 million in net county cost. In total, staffing adjustments account for the addition of 15 positions for this priority. The assessor will implement a 2-year pilot using special deed reading software anticipated to positively affect department performance outcomes. The auditor-controller continues to partner with county departments to implement solutions for financial and budget management to ensure fiscal integrity for years to come. Additionally, proposed budget will add staff to provide support to the payroll division, adding 1 position to the department allocation. A total of 3 new positions will be added to the Chief Executive Office, adding support to the budget and economic development teams, and a DEI manager to establish diversity, equity, and inclusion as a core function within the Chief Executive Office, building upon the foundation of work that already exists within the county. Provisions in the proposed budget will fund additional contracted and advertising services and support the department and overall organization through the addition of 5 new positions to support the department and overall, to support the Chief Executive Office Human Relations Division. The clerk recorder budget will fund costs associated with the staffing, supplies, and services needed to successfully conduct the November 2022 gubernatorial election. This includes the provision of materials and services that are provided to the public and operation of approximately 30 vote centers throughout the county. County Council will transition one of its physical legal reference collections into a digital format to improve office efficiencies. County operations encompasses a variety of administrative budgets overseen by the Chief Executive Office for the benefit of the overall organization. Of note in this category are provisions for cannabis funds to support behavioral health and recovery services, youth substance use disorder services, and the conversion of the Crows Landing Industrial Business Park budget into a capital project fund, providing the ability for project funds to be retained in this budget year over year. The General Services Agency will align staffing with the departmental structure and its needs, transferring 8 positions between divisions and adding 3 new positions to support operations and provide area expertise, for a net increase of 3 positions to the department allocation. Additionally, the department will fund IT and project needs and purchase replacement vehicles. Information Technology Central will combine its 2 budget units into one for effective operations management, transfer positions for more efficient service delivery, and add positions to increase department and embedded services across the organization. These adjustments will result in a net increase to the department position allocation by 3 positions. Before I start in on staffing, I want to note that a lot of times when we think about budget, we think about dollars. But when we talk about budget, we're talking about overall resources that we need for the organization, and that includes staffing. And I wanted to take a moment to thank the HR team who works within the CEO budget team, Ryan, Loop, Carmen Melania, and Bernie Licata, because they do a lot of work behind the scenes. It's not the dollars. It does require dollars to support. But as you can see, when I go through the staffing in totality, you will see that they've done a lot of work with this proposed budget to provide those resources to our departments. Authorized positions identified in the 21-22 third quarter report totaled 4,664. Since then, another 5 positions have been added with an effective date of June 4th, 2022. The 2022-2023 proposed budget recommendations add another 47 positions for a total authorized count of 4,716, if approved as is. Please note that this total does not include any recommended position adjustments from items approved on today's board agenda. This line chart depicts a comparison of the number of full-time allocated positions, the top line noted in light green, and the number of full-time employees shown in the dark green, with the vacancy rate identified by percentage annually since July 1 of 2010. The recommended 22-23 proposed budget position allocation of 4,716 has been added to show the continued growth of position allocations to meet resource needs across the organization, primarily in response to mandated programs and increased services to the community. The widening gap between the 2 lines shown indicates the increasing vacancy rate that has occurred over time. As of May 1st, 2022, the organizational vacancy rate was 17.1%. If the recommended proposed budget staffing recommendations are approved as is, the vacancy rate will immediately increase to 18% as those positions are vacant upon approval. There are several factors impacting the growing vacancy rate, including increased structural employee turnover in the employment marketplace, impacting already hard to recruit positions and general retention. The CEO Human Relations team is working to identify solutions to these challenges. This is the last of the proposed budget schedules, and I will turn it over now to Jody Hayes, our CEO, who will provide highlights on next steps and direction for the county.
Thank you very much, Jewel and team, and for our department heads for joining us this morning. I asked to go last this morning because I wanted to highlight a couple of very significant recommendations and direction that we're seeking from the Board of Supervisors to provide additional opportunities for us to, bottom line, improve in services in our community. And I want to talk about that for a moment. The recommendations I'm going to go through have been heavily influenced by my conversations with every single board member over the last year plus, and recognizing the priority issues that you bring forward to our attention almost on a daily basis, areas of concern, areas in which you think you would like to see us invest our financial strength to improve services in the community. They are also heavily influenced by the department heads, and spending time with department heads, recognizing what is going well in the organization, where are the challenges in the organization, and given more resources, how could we mobilize ourselves to improve some of the services that the average person in our community may see on a daily basis. So with all of that data and input, we get to this time where we're nearing the close of the end of a fiscal year, recognizing that as we develop our long-range fiscal model that you heard a little bit about earlier, and that has really been the hallmark for us and developing our financial models and recommendations for decades, for as long as I've been with the county, we recognize the sheer number of variables that go into those formulas that impact recommendations, that impact where we prioritize dollars, and ultimately how those dollars may or may not be spent in any given fiscal year. And we also recognize that sometimes you really have to reconsider how we prioritize those variables and what risks we may be willing to take in the future in order to ensure that the tax dollars that support this community are being spent as close to real time as possible to support the needs and the demands that all of us see as we drive through our community each day. That's what these next two slides are about, and I want to share with you what all of that has culminated in. We essentially have come up with two strategies to try to prioritize some expenditures in ways that we previously have not. The first strategy is one that we called our Building Community Service Investment Fund, and our strategy is to spend down $60 million in our general fund balance over the next 3 fiscal years. We have some sense of confidence over the next 3 fiscal years that even given certain financial models and what may occur in the broader economy, we're very, very confident that the expenditures of these funds in this fashion will not jeopardize our ability to maintain core public services out in the future. That's a very important issue for us because we don't want to take a risk that puts us in jeopardy of some of the essential basic services that you hear in these presentations before you during budget. So we have identified an amount, and that amount is $60 million. And it's obviously something that you cannot program overnight, but you can over a period of time. And for us, that period of time is going to be 3 years. We have 3 different categories that we are proposing, and what we're seeking today is just the board's general input and direction on whether or not you appreciate these categories or whether you want to see us go some other direction and so forth. And then we're going to spend time over the summer working with the board on developing specific parameters around these, and then we will come back at final budget with a very specific direction on how to program and implement what's before you today. The 3 different categories are, number 1, enhancing our county parks and library system. There is no other way in which we can directly impact the experience and opportunity for our community and individuals and families to enjoy our community other than through our parks and libraries system. So we've prioritized a large portion of this to support the infrastructure as well as the expansion and supports of that system. We're going to have many, many ideas that come forward about what we can do to prioritize libraries and parks, and you'll see those in the next several months as we develop these plans. I want to recognize that in the budget we had already identified some consulting services that would help us identify all of the current infrastructure needs within those departments and put us on a pathway to improving their services, improving their infrastructure. So we were already orientating ourselves to do that. With these recommendations, we're basically going to turbocharge that process, and we're going to go do these things as soon as we possibly can. I also want to acknowledge that these strategies that are before you today have just been shared with our department heads within probably the last few days, that we have been seeking their input and their advice on concerns and challenges and so forth, but we are going to need our departments to come alongside us and help us perfect these plans as we work on them over the summer. The next category is about $28 million, and that is around the restoration of our county properties. You will note that we have buildings that employees work in or that we maintain that may go back almost 100 years. We're literally getting to that place in our life cycle. We also have newer and modern buildings. But even this building that we're all in today, enjoying this meeting, this building is over 20 plus years old at this point and is aging in ways that require capital infrastructure and investments. So even our modern facilities that we may think of as not requiring additional investments, they do. We have a large number of our county buildings that are easily over 30 to 40 years old, and we have not done all that we would have liked to have done to maintain those facilities and to ensure that our community has a pleasant experience when they enter those facilities, as well as the employees who show up every single day to support our community. What we're talking about here are very basic things such as parking lots. We're talking about HVAC systems. We're talking about roofs that leak every single winter, and finally going in and making some of those improvements. These are the things that we prioritize in our own daily lives, in our own homes. But as a county government, we haven't always had the funding that's necessary, and therefore you result to fixing things as they become the point where you can't just patch something going forward. So we're going to go in and make some much needed improvements to our county properties, and we can easily spend the dollar amount that you see there. I also want to acknowledge that we're going to use some of these funds to demolish some properties that are no longer serving any use to the organization, or actually costing us money to maintain, but are not in a future capital plan and therefore need to be brought down. So you're going to see some of us prioritize there. The last box I want to mention here is the one that is the least developed at this point, but we're hoping to soon, and that is around stabilizing the county workforce. And Joshua, if I could have you just go back a couple of slides to that. There you go, right there. Thank you very much. We did not rehearse that. Good job, Joshua. Thank you. You know, you'll see the trend line here is unsustainable for us as an organization. This is occurring throughout the country, throughout our state, that, you know, the ability to retain staff and attract new staff to perform essential services is extremely challenging. It is for all public organizations. It is for private organizations. So we're not acting as if the county organization is any different than anywhere else. We also have to recognize, as many of the department heads have brought to my attention, that we are bordering with that kind of a vacancy rate on significant risk issues in our community. Things that used to take 1 or 2 days for us to perform an essential service for someone in the public that is relying upon us to support their family or to support their safety and their health in some particular way. That service that may have taken 1 or 2 days now may take weeks. And that is what is occurring. I think when I listen to our department heads come before us, I'm always encouraged because every single one of them have a can-do attitude. You have to have that to lead in this organization, and they all have a can-do attitude. When the public comes forward and asks for something particular, or board members, they find a way to make sure that that happens. What this is about is what are our service levels on an aggregate and what is happening with them. And with a 17+% vacancy rate, it's trending the wrong direction. On an aggregate, our service levels are taking a significant hit in this community. So we will prioritize some funds. We'll work with the Board of Supervisors. We'll work with our county departments to try to address this issue in the best way possible. To whatever degree necessary, we'll also work with our labor organizations and our employee representatives on this issue. But we wanted to make sure that it was prioritized and acknowledged that it is something that we're going to need to address as an organization. From our perspective, there's no reason that county employees who have worked with us for a long time and successfully demonstrated their competence, they should not be driving outside of our community to go work somewhere else, especially if they live and enjoy life here in Stanislaus County. We do want to retain them and support those who stay with us. Good. Fast forward a couple slides there, Joshua. The second strategy that we're going to implement here is also something new, and what we're calling our Building Community Infrastructure Fund. We recognize that over the last many years, on average, we're pulling in at least about $15 million in fund balance saving each year in the general fund. Most of that is the result of what I just discussed with vacancy rates. So vacancy rates are allowing us to save more and more general fund dollars each year. We want to recognize that we can take that fiscal strength and we can program it in kind of real time, closer to the fiscal year in which it's realized, to try to support some of the basic needs that our Board of Supervisors bring to us that you hear from the community. And we hear these things frequently. So we're talking about basic infrastructure items. We're very pleased that we have great resources through ARPA, where we're going to program $50 million of infrastructure improvements in Stanislaus County over the course of the next 6 months or so, and we're excited for that. We also know that the need and the number is way beyond that. Over $600 million needed, in which we have $50 million prioritized through ARPA. So in this process, at the end of each fiscal year, we're going to actually bring forward a fiscal policy for the board's direction, and what we're asking you today is to weigh in on it, if this is a direction you want us to go with, and then we'll perfect it with you and bring it back at final budget. But in this process, we're going to create fiscal policy that allows us each year to identify a portion of savings and then to equally distribute that savings by board district and to actually program it most likely in the Public Works budget by final budget, and to move those dollars over and to allow board members to work with Public Works or Parks and Rec, planning, any other department that's necessary to spend those funds to prioritize them on the issues that you're hearing most predominantly in your district. These would be equally distributed amongst board members and provide general fund support in a way that we have not traditionally provided in our community. We're excited for this concept because we see that it is improving our performance from a budget perspective, improving services in the community as quickly as possible given the resources that we may have in any given year. This is going to go up and down in any given year. We may very well have years where we can't approve any of these funds in a particular budget cycle, but many years we can. In the upcoming budget or at the upcoming year-end close, we are targeting an amount of about $15 million to prioritize in this fund, and we're hoping to reach that. Our projections suggest that we should be able to reach that in the upcoming budget. So I'm going to go ahead and transition, and my closing remarks are to just thank this entire team that has put this together once again. But I want to fall back and thank the members of the Board of Supervisors. I know they comment on their board brief or their budget briefings each time, but the budget before you is truly shaped by the feedback that we receive from them, not just in those budget briefings, but also on a daily basis as they're picking up the phone, writing those messages, walking into our offices and saying, they always start with a thank you. I thank you for doing all of these great things. Can we also do this? And all of those requests, can you also do this? I think a lot of them are merging into some of these recommendations that are before you in this budget. And as your staff, we really appreciate your direction, your leadership, and helping shape these kinds of recommendations going forward. We hope we've gotten close to hitting the mark, but we're also really interested to hear your feedback on it, and if you'd like us to improve on it in any way, that's why we're here. I'm going to turn it back over to Jewel to do recommendations and finalize.
Yes, thank you, Jody. So just a reminder that you can find the 2022-2023 proposed budget on our website at www.stancounty.com/budget. Alternately, you can just go to the Stan County website and go to the bottom of the page, and you'll see the piggy bank at the bottom. You can click right there, and you can quickly access the proposed budget and any other previous budget posted there. There are 9 staff recommendations before you this morning, and so I will just summarize them as we go. Number 1 is to accept the 22-23 recommended proposed budget from the Chief Executive Officer. 2 is to conduct the scheduled public hearing to receive public comment and input on the proposed budget. 3, direct and approve any changes the Board of Supervisors chooses to make and then adopt the 22-23 budget, proposed budget. 4 is to authorize the use of $153,250 in Stanislaus County EMS System Enhancement Funds to purchase 2 new vehicles for the Emergency Medical Services Agency within the Sheriff's Department. 5, authorize the Chief Executive Officer and the Auditor Controller to make any necessary technical adjustments required to implement the approved proposed budget. 6, consider the priorities Jody just covered for a new building and community service investment strategy, which will include one-time investment of fund balance from the County General Fund with a provision for ongoing annual contribution to a building community infrastructure fund to be established upon recommendation by the Chief Executive Officer with the 2022-2023 recommended final budget. 7, amend the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect the recommended changes in the 22-23 recommended proposed budget to become effective at the start of the first pay period on or after July 2nd, 2022. 8, approve contracts and/or agreements listed in Attachment 3 in cumulative amounts of $200,000 or greater since July 1, 2020, and authorize the General Services Agency Director, Publishing Agent, or previously authorized department head to sign. And finally, direct the Chief Executive Officer to prepare the 22-23 recommended final budget and set the public hearing for consideration of the final budget on September 20th, 2022. And with that, that concludes our presentation of the proposed budget. CEO budget team and department heads are available for any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. Patrice, Jewel, Joshua, Ruben, Kamal, Patrick, who am I missing? Jeff. Thank you all for your presentations. Very well done. Thank you. Okay, any questions or comments from the board?
Comments, but
Before we get back. Okay, nothing. Okay, we'll open up the public. Any questions, comments? I know I have one here from Stephen. Come on up. One speaker card. Stephen, how are you?
Mr. Chairman, I'm doing just fine. Good afternoon, everybody. The questions I've got concerned something that was posted in the 81-page document that was part of the agenda item, and it has to do with summary of fund balance. It's actually page 6 of the proposed budget in that particular document. And what it's basically covering is our total balances right now are estimated to be about $608 million at the end of this fiscal year, and we will use $106 million of that in the upcoming fiscal year, lowering the fund balances to about $502 million. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Chairman, is are you comfortable tapping into those funds to draw that money out in order to basically close the budget gap on this year's budget?
So I would say we do that every year. We dip into our fund balance, and then what we'll find, Stephen, is we come back here with final budget, that we see actually, because of a lot of things like the vacancies we're talking about here, we end up with more than what we had expected. It carries over, because when we get to our final budget, we come up with our actual numbers that happened in the last year's budget, and we see what we'd allocated, what we budgeted for, but what we actually spent in there. And we've been blessed, unfortunately, or cursed, because we can't fund a lot of these positions. You can see with our 18% vacancy, that we end up with with funds that carry over into the next year. So yeah, the answer, I guess, is yeah, we're very comfortable with dipping into those, and that's part of the reason, as you see, as we talk about the ending part of the presentation with Jody here, is we have been continually increasing our fund balance each year, and so we're looking for ways to get that money out into the public, the taxpayer fund. So yeah, so the answer is simply yes.
Okay, all righty.
Sorry.
Okay, well, it was a wavy way to get there, because I also heard something that Supervisor Chiesa pointed out that I was not aware of, is in the compared to our adjacent counties, we're not doing as well as holding on to our property tax money. So I did some rough calculations during the presentation, and if our numbers were more in line, basically we almost wouldn't even have to tap into this budget, that our numbers would pretty much pencil out. So I guess the second question is there any long-term hope to get further relief from the legislature so that our numbers of what we retain in property taxes would be closer in line with our neighbors, and that would definitely ease our budgeting, because, everybody's budget's under pressure this year. Who thought we'd be paying $6 a gallon for gasoline and $7 a gallon for diesel?
It doesn't appear the state is going through the same budget headache that we are, or that most cities are. But we're working on that, right? We're all working on it collectively.
Right. It took an active veto to get the last increase there.
Well, then I guess we're going to need a second active veto to try to get a little bit more back.
That's right.
So anyway, that's what I had. I just wanted to make sure that we were all comfortable with these numbers, because we're all aware we can't print money like the federal government. So we have to live within our means, and if we kept drawing down $100 million each year from this general fund without the reserves, without it being replenished, eventually we'd be in real deep trouble. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get you back here at final budget, and we'll see where we actually end up, and you'll feel more comfortable with that, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
If it's all right, a point of clarification, in this year's budget, it's $29.2 million in general fund balance. The other funds are from other fund types. So that's a combination. When you look at the full $106.2 million, it's various fund types, and they have other ways of retaining earnings from prior years that they depend on. And so it's separate from the general fund component is 29.2.
Okay, I misspoke. I referred to it as the general fund, but I was basically looking at this whole
Right.
sheet and the whole thing, and it's saying, hey, wait a second, this doesn't look sustainable.
Perfect.
Understandable.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. Any other public comment, questions? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for comments. Supervisor Chiesa.
So, first of all, huge thank you again. I love the briefings. I see lots of things that come out of the briefings. It is not the CEO presents the budget, the team comes up with things that they hear from the board members. I just want everyone in the public to feel like we do have a lot of input into this, even though it was portrayed earlier that that might not be the case. The rule of farming is to always spend less than you take in, and that's always been my thought process, but the rule of government is to spend exactly what you take in. It's not to create large reserves, because it's the public's money that they're demanding service for, or the service that we've promised or should be providing. And I know earlier, Patrice started out by saying that I said the long-range model was wrong. I said it much more eloquently and sweet. But the bottom line is that we use that as our target document. And if you just think about the Titanic moving, if you make incremental changes, you're going to miss the iceberg that's 50 miles away or 100 miles away. And I had pulled out a previous one from 6 or 7 years, and it was completely wrong except for the first year of the budget cycle that we were in, but it was always because we were staying on the conservative side. And I think there's a recognition now internally that there's new revenue that we haven't accounted for that we believe is long-term revenue. It's not one-time revenue where things get good. So you're always afraid, and the board has always been conservative on that side, as well as staff, that we don't program unless we know it's new money. And so we believe there's new money. A reserve, I remember the figures at our retreat when we started talking about fund balance getting a little, continuing to go up because of position allocations that we can't fill. So we keep carrying over. As the chairman was talking about, we were looking at a range, and we tried to put up a big range, but we were talking about the 220 to 250 million on a almost $6 billion budget. That's a comfort level. And it looks like we're going to exceed that, so we're going to spend that money down. Is that ongoing revenue, or is that one-time spend down? And a portion, the 3 years that the CEO had talked about of spending down $20 million a year, you're going to see those go to one-time, at least that's the vision, one-time, fixed buildings, things. We always build a shiny new building, a Turlock library, and it looks fantastic. In the meantime, someone's over at County Center 3 in a 70 or 80-year-old building that leaks all the time. So this is an opportunity for us to fix those. Parks sound great. New swing sets, make sure everything works, the bathrooms work so that it's a good experience. So I'm completely supportive of those one-time spend down of up to $60 million, as long as the economy keeps going. And then as far as putting the money into the infrastructure buckets, I'm generally supportive of that too, and it depends on how the program comes out, because the way we're going through our $50 million is very methodical, the ARPA funds. We're trying to choose, what could potentially be annexed into a city. We're having listening sessions, and I think that there has to be a priority that it can't become a slush fund for anyone. It needs to be projects that are on this, in the queue for areas, sidewalks, drainage, the same things we're going through. I don't suppose we would stray from that, but again, I'm generally supportive of splitting it up by districts, because that's fair and equitable, and there is no shortage of need in the community. So.
Okay, thanks, Vito. Buck?
I just want to thank staff for all their time. I'm not going to go through all the names. I know during the briefing process, I had a lot of questions, and all my questions were answered, and I am in favor of the infrastructure projects, or the funding of those. Again, like Vito was saying, I think it comes down to how the policies are written and how those projects are chosen. Yeah, it's a good budget. Our priorities are being hit. The one thing I don't like is obviously the increase in the vacancy rate, because I know what that does to our employees. They're constantly under pressure to try to get projects done, and I feel their pain, and I know we have ideas to close that. I just wish it was happening quicker.
Thanks, Buck. Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, very excited about this budget. I just want to thank county staff for all their hard work and their diligence on this, and bringing it forward, and we'll continue to progress this forward to the final. Very, very excited about the $15 million that will be set aside for infrastructure projects in our unincorporated areas, and it will provide, I guess, a pathway or a strategic game plan after we use that $50 million ARPA funds, which the need, like Mr. Akias has said, it's everywhere, and it's a need that will continue, but this is at least a step in the right direction to continually and annually provide those services for those unincorporated areas and those disenfranchised communities. So great job to county staff. Hats off to you. You did a wonderful job presenting this. Thank you.
Thanks, Chance. Just to reiterate what everybody said, again, you guys are superstars. It's unbelievable, the numbers that we get from you, the quality of those numbers that probably helps us be in the position we're in right now, because you guys can give us that information and we can make decisions with good information. We seldom find ourselves going back and having to correct something that we missed. Never anything of any monumental, knock on wood, I probably shouldn't say that, but everything is great, and it helps us be able to make the decisions we do up here. It's a good time to be a supervisor, is a good way to say this. When you look at what's going on here right now in the county, we talk about these reserves, and we keep reminding, these are the taxpayers' dollars, right? These are all of our dollars that we have here, and our mission is to spend these things wisely, but then to protect and prepare for those times when we don't have these reserves. And we've been blessed, we say this all the time, our forefathers, our previous boards that have always been very conservative in nature and made sure that we were able to weather the storms. And there's still a part of us that have been, that we've been through the times when we're cutting our workforce by 25%, and we're cutting people's pay by 8%, we think, between pay and medical. And just trying to just hang on from year to year. And so it's hard, and I have clients like that have come through hard times, recessions and stuff, and then it's hard to get them, okay, it's okay right now. You can expand, expand your business, improve, your infrastructure, you can do those things, but it's still that resistance a little bit. It's like when I look at this and we talk about the $60 million, for the community service investment, and then the, additional amount for infrastructure fund, you flinch a little bit because you think, geez, I don't know we should be doing this, but I do think that, again, this is well thought out and what we're looking at, and we're going to make sure that that we still continue to have good numbers to be able to plan, and these numbers are based on our projections and good numbers that we will be okay to do this, and this is stuff that needs to be done. We need to improve, a lot of these things. I think it's great that that bucket number 3 is going to get most of that infrastructure fund. I appreciate that. I think it's a little bigger than the rest of the buckets. But as we move forward with this and we work through how we're going to spend this money and where it's going to go, I feel very comfortable just because of what you guys have done, the work you've done that lets us know we can get there and still not jeopardize our position, still keep us strong and healthy, and to be ready for the next, shoe to drop, which we know will happen, but we'll be prepared for that. So just love the work you guys do. Very proud of you. As we have our briefings, as everybody said, everybody's had the input, emphasize, contrary to what we heard earlier today, this is very much a group effort, and everybody's involved in this process as far as arriving at these numbers. And there is so much input that comes, through us from the community. As we express our concerns in areas that comes directly from the community. And so I feel very confident that what we're doing is led by our community to get things done. So I thank you guys very much for your hard work. This looks good and very exciting on what we're gonna do here in the next year. So with that,
Motion to approve all staff recommendations.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Passes unanimously. Thank you guys very much. Okay. We will move on to correspondence. I don't have my special, that's okay.
This board has received the correspondence and claims as noted on the agenda.
Refer to,
No.
as noted in the agenda. And
That sounds good.
there we go. Sorry, I lost my reading points here. Very good, okay. Any other Board of Supervisor reports?
Yeah, I got just a little bit. I know we're getting close to 1 o'clock. Yesterday at the Commission on Aging meeting, I was able to recognize Billy Taylor for her 20 years as our senior assembly member, and Mickey Peabody for her 15 years as senior senator, and all the advocacy they've done for our seniors here in Stanislaus County. Also had the opportunity last week to ride out with AMR on pretense of our EMS agency starting up July 1st. Wanted to get out and learn a little bit. The EMS system's constantly changing, so I did a little ride along with AMR and learned quite a bit. Also had a chance to go out with our care team. I want to thank Raul Dominguez and Doug Holcomb for taking me out and showing me what they do. It was a very humbling experience. Almost left me kind of heartbroken, but I was also impressed with our care team and their professionalism and the care that they gave to some of our homeless community out there. And I just wanted to recognize them and recognize the team about the good work they're doing.
That's great. Thanks, Buck. Anybody else, Vito?
I was the election observer on behalf of everyone. I thought it was a very fair election. I do want to say something about our constitutional elected folks. I'll leave the board members, but every 4 years, the people get to determine how good of a job you're doing. And Assessor Gakel, Auditor Gill, Treasurer Riley, Clerk Recorder Linder, and Sheriff Dirksey chose to run again, and none of them had an opponent, and I think that speaks volume. And I saw Jeff Legero just walk out. He was going to be the new district attorney. Birgit Flatterer is retiring. But again, it speaks volumes of the job they're doing. And when we talked about tax sharing, these aren't one-person jobs. They don't have all the information. When we do budgets, every one of those positions comes into play in some capacity, so congratulations on that. I'm not going to say anything about the other positions, and Superintendent Kuykendall also. That just reminded me, yesterday they broke up the homeless encampment. It was a large one in Turlock, 99 in West Main. And I went out, and Supervisor Condit and I had a conversation earlier about the care team, and they're not made up strictly of county employees. Some of them are contracted employees through other organizations. But the fact that most of the people refused services, not a lot of people were happy out there, doesn't deter these folks. They have more compassion and, in their pinky than I probably have in my whole life. It is just amazing, the giving spirit of trying to help these people out and get them into services with probably a 95% rejection rate. But as I posted yesterday, that doesn't mean we should give up, because a person that finds housing or gets into drug and alcohol or a mental health assessment and gets some help there, it's worth it, because that's really the name of the game. I know our point-in-time count was down, but it doesn't feel like that's actually the case out there. And Raul does a good job of leading that. Mark Ferrer is very supportive, and behavioral health supportive, so a good thing. And then the reason that Supervisor Condon and I were talking was we were pretty disheartened because there was a family out there. And I'll leave it at that, but there's no excuse in this time that we allow families, children to be out in that environment. And it just isn't suited. I know that adults can make decisions on their own, but kids can't. So something we need to work a little harder on, and we were talking about that. So.
Okay, thanks, Vito. I know it's so hard when we've seen the kids out there. It's not, being homeless isn't a reason to be able to take a child away from, as far as Child Protective Services, we've looked into that several times, and that's just not, but that doesn't seem, anyway, tough to deal with, I get it. Okay, no other Board of Supervisor reports. We'll do legislative, fiscal, and management report. CEO Jody Hayes.
Just a quick recognition that we're still pending final approval of the state budget, which always has a variety of impacts at the local level. We'll let you know when we see that cross the finish line, but not a lot of detail available, to be honest with you. So we're always curious or a little anxious when you don't see much detail coming, and then it all kind of flows all at the same time. Next, I just wanted to, I know this was mentioned earlier, provide an announcement of the Board of Supervisors special meeting for tomorrow, June 15th. We are visiting 3 different areas in the community as part of our tour of unincorporated areas in support of our infrastructure projects. And our schedule for tomorrow is that at 8:30 a.m. we have a bus leaving here that's open to the public. It'll be leaving here at 8:30 at 1010 10th Street here in downtown Modesto. Our tour tomorrow starts at 9 a.m. At the Kenwood Avenue neighborhood, which is at the corner of Star Avenue and North Mitchell in Turlock. We are then going to Montana Park. Did I get that right? Yes. Yeah, Montana Park at 1001 Montana Avenue in Turlock, where we will reconvene the special meeting. And then at 11 a.m., we will be at Fairview Park, which is on the corner of Placer Avenue and Tucson Avenue in Modesto, in which we will complete our special meeting at that location. And just want to thank our entire team and logistics team that has pulled that off. It's been quite an adventure, so thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, before we adjourn, we're going to go into closed session. Tom, you want to?
Yes, we have several items this afternoon in closed session. The first item is conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, subdivision D1. One case there, Scenic Faculty Medical Group, Inc. versus County of Stanislaus, and that's in the Stanislaus Superior Court, and the case number is CV 21004188. We have a conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency negotiators and the labor organizations are listed in the agenda. The last item we will be sitting as the in-home supportive services public authority, and the closed session there is a conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency negotiators are Jody Hayes, Bert Dunphy, Kara Vink, Tamara Thomas, and the labor organization is In-Home Supportive Services, UDWA. Would that be appropriate for public comment?
Okay, any comment with regard to closed session? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.
Stephen again.